All right, so in today's video, we are going to show you how to do a shed construction project right from scratch. We're talking about from digging out the dirt to putting the last coat of paint on, and we're going to use all the tools I'm wearing right here. That's it. Anybody can do this, and if you can build a shed, remember, you can build a house. So the most important part of building your custom shed is layout and design. Remember, design world, when we're designing something, it has to function. And it doesn't have to just function for everybody, it has to function just for you. So what you need to consider is, what kind of storage space are you creating? Now let's face it, in today's world in North America, we are a consumer economy. We got stuff. We got so much stuff. We have garages attached to our house. We don't even put our car in it. We have sheds for gardening, and they're so full of stuff, you can't even begin to pot any seeds in there anymore. So we need more space. So the best way to do it is to build yourself a custom shed. Get some of the things out of your way, like your lawnmower, so that you can use your other shed. Get some room to store all your tools so you can get your garage back. This is the solution to a lot of your problems. So let's talk about what to do when you're thinking about building a shed. First up, let's talk about the space that you need to build one. It doesn't seem to matter what kind of home you live in, no matter where you are in this country, you're going to need more space. So if you don't have a lot of yard, you might find yourself building like a little addition on the outside of your house and just some simple swing doors. That might be fine. But if you've got property like this and you're going to have lawn maintenance equipment and you've got a lot of hobbies and that sort of thing, then you need a lot more space. So if you have the room for something rectangular, I like to suggest that. I like to have lots of doors on a storage area because I don't like it when you open the only door and you've got your lawnmower sitting right there in front of you and all you do is pitch things into the corner because you can't get into the room. And that ends up just being a bunch of clutter mess, right? So I like rectangles, and we have a building code where we're from where we can go 10 feet by 10 feet by 10 feet high, and we don't need to get a permit for that because it's not a permanent structure. So that's kind of the idea that we're going to work with today. We're going to build it a little more rectangular, 10 by 8, but if you want to get something longer or more square, or even make yourself a round Mongolian yurt, the secret is you need storage and you've got to keep it dry. So let's talk about things that are in the backyard that are going to cause you problems and how to avoid them. Now before we build, we need to plan, and there are 4 things you need to consider before you do that. Drainage, sound, wind, and ugly. All right? You want to do 4 things with your shed. You want to hide things that are unsightly. You want to protect yourself from wind if you get too much wind and it's making something difficult to grow in your garden, or you want privacy issues. Or like we have a schoolyard behind us, so behind this property, we're actually going to create this shed to be actually a sound barrier wall as well, which will be brilliant. No more kids screaming and school bells taking up the space in the afternoon. And the other thing you want to deal with is drainage. Now this is crucial because this will affect the integrity of the structure. Almost every house that's built is built with the idea of drainage, where the water is supposed to be running away from the building, collecting in ditches or culverts or something like that. And back here, we are actually at the lowest part of this property, but on the other side of the fence, the drainage continues to go about another 10 or 12 feet, which means even though we're a 4-season climate and we're gonna get thaw and freeze cycles, we aren't gonna have a buildup of water turning to ice here. So when we build our shed, as long as we pour our concrete on top of a stone pad, we're going to be just fine, and we're not going to experience all that heaving and cracking and breaking and tearing things apart. So this is good to go. So remember, drainage, wind, sound, and ugly, as long as you take care of all of those in consideration of what you're going to build, you're going to be just fine. Now what we have here is a really typical kind of pre-built shed, 8 by 8 by 8. It's got this double pitch roof. Let's just see. We're right. Yep, there's the lawnmower. And this is all you have access to for space. Typical. And this might not be a problem for you. This might actually be the solution you're looking for. The secret here is this homeowner built it on those little 2 by 2 foot concrete slabs on gravel. But when you build it that way, you have to make it dead perfect, because these kind of prefab kits have no mercy if you don't have them exactly square and level and plumb. So just a word of warning, if you're going to get a kit like this, which runs a little over 500 bucks, if that's going to be enough space to solve your problem, you're going to want to watch step 2 of our program here to know how to pour a concrete pad, because that pad is going to save you a lot of time and aggravation. It took him almost 3 days to build this from when I was talking to him. If he had the pad, he could have done it in an afternoon. So if this is enough solution for you, that's great. Word of warning, my experience, no matter how big your storage area is, you're gonna fill it. So keep that in mind. If this is gonna be okay, maybe going an extra couple $100 and learning how to build something twice as big might be a better solution. So just remember, when you're designing your shed or your outdoor building, keep in mind the neighborhood. Look at the lay of the land. Try to imagine what it's going to look like when it's there. You don't want what you make to be a huge monstrosity. So in our design, we're actually going to do just a single slope roof. And you can see in the background, if you put a big rectangle there with a single slope roof, it's going to fit in right along with the line of that cedar hedge. You're not obstructing your sight line. It's not going to look like a monstrosity from the other neighbors around the corner. And so you're not going to get any kickback from your neighbors, right? The other things for design, think about using big barn doors, lots of access. Think about having a secondary door around the side where you can bring the lawnmower instead of in the middle, off the corner, all right? Have one set of the walls set aside just for your lawnmower. If you tuck it away and you only have to sweep a couple of feet every once in a while from the grass clippings, it'll keep the rest of your shed nice and clean. I always like to say, put in a couple of simple windows, maybe something that opens up to get some airflow. I always like to pour my pad a little bigger than the building. It gives you an outdoor storage space. Maybe the opportunity for a little sitting area if you have a view that would take in the sunset. It's just a thought. And last but not least, think about some hanging planters or window boxes. Dress it up. Remember, it's a part of the home. It's just a little bit off the side. So if you make it look pretty, it'll actually increase the value of your property. And it's not going to cost you that much. A little bit of sweat equity, right? But we're going to show you everything you need to do. So stay tuned with us on the ride. So in this project, we are building a shed in the backyard, and we're going to build it on top of a concrete slab. So we thought that we would take the time to go through the process for making a concrete slab, because there are a lot of things you can use when you know how to use concrete. You can make walkways and foundations for small buildings, and you can just have like an unlimited opportunity to solve problems around your house with concrete if you know how to use it. It's also a great foundation if you're building stairs or even going up and on off the deck. So there's no limit to it, right? But you got to get the process proper. And this is what it's all about today. There's some science behind it. And if you understand the science, then if you run into specific problems, you'll know how to solve them too. So let's get busy here. We've basically just done an outline here. It's an 8x12 slab that we made here. And I do this just because I'm a visual guy. I like to see what I'm going to end up with. And I can kind of use this layout here to identify my problems. So the process is simple. First, you have to have your layout. Second, you got to get rid of your organics, because there's no sense building anything structural on top of grass. It's going to end up rotting and everything's going to be moving around, and you'll get a big crack in your concrete, and you don't want that. So we have to remove our grass, get these stones out of the way. We have to build a frame. We have to level the frame. We want to introduce gravel because we need drainage. We can use that to level everything off. Then we'll get into the mixing of the concrete, and then we'll deal with how to finish it off so you get a decent look. Now, in this video, we are not going to be approaching this as professional concrete installers. I am not one. I work with concrete a little bit, usually just filling holes in basements. But in this video, we're going to show you how to use some of the basic tools you have at home so that you don't have to spend a fortune in order to get into the concrete business. Here we go. So basically, we just have a few basic garden tools. I'm pretty sure everybody has these if you own a house with a backyard. Otherwise, you wouldn't have much need of a pad. So we've got some stone shovels, and this is my little garden shovel. This is great, it's for edging, but this does a really nice job of getting the sod removed, okay? And just a thought, if you have a lot of sod and it's really thick grass you need to remove, there is a sod cutting machine that you can rent, and it drops a blade in there and it does a really quick job. It can be a little bit of a pain in the butt picking it up and cleaning it and taking it back, but if you're doing a large area, it makes a real quick work of that. Next, we're gonna need this large tooth rake. This is for moving our gravel around, of course a level, and then various shovels because we have slope. Almost every yard has got a kind of slope, so you're gonna be moving some dirt. Can't get away from that. And then that's really it. It's not that tricky. The only other secret weapon we have here today is we have a concrete mixer. We're not mixing concrete in a pail. If I did 50 bags, I would probably go through a dozen pails. The little technique I use of mixing concrete in a pail for filling a hole in the basement doesn't work here, unfortunately, because after the third or fourth bag, the pail blows up. So we've gone out and picked up this little handy dandy homeowner's version of a cement mixer. It's one bag at a time. We're gonna put it through the ringer today and see how well it works. Hopefully it lasts the whole day and we don't run into problems. And of course, our tools are in the description below if you want to take a look. And we have an awesome wheelbarrow over here. I don't know where Max got this thing. It's got 2 tires on it. I love it. It just seems to make the whole process a lot easier for moving things around. Now, there's not much else to do other than talk about the fact that we have to get dirty. It's hot today. I'm gonna be a mess. So let's just get to the chase. Time to get dirty. So like a lot of jobs, step 1 of your project is always preparation. So what we need to do is remove our organics and our stones here out of our way so that we can have a nice compacted gravel base. So we're gonna just get dirty and roll this up and get it out of here. And we're gonna start by trying to salvage these big blocks because I would like to use these as a ramp later for my lawnmower so that I can open up a side door and push that lawnmower into the back of the shed instead of coming through the front door all the time and getting everything dirty. That's a great way to lift a rock. Sweet. So when you're removing sod, remember the roots for the grass are actually what you want to get rid of. So you're looking for about 1 inch, inch to a quarter, and that's generally what was left after we pulled those big stones out of the way. So all you do is get this little garden rake. Now look at this. Once you're underneath the roots, everything comes up real nice and easy. That's not that tricky, is it? That's why the beauty of this straight blade, right? That does all the work for you. You don't want to fight it from the top because you're trying to cut through all the roots. Here we're just separating this root material from the dirt. Okay, so we've got rid of our organics, and now we are just trenching the front of the pad. This is at the high side, and it's just a matter of creating a hole. Because we're on a hill, and I'm using these 5/4 boards as my framing, I'm gonna stick this in. I wanna be able to drop it in so that my concrete finish is just a little bit above the grass. And then I'm gonna level off the box, okay? Now, the sides don't need to be leveled off, but the front and the back sure do, because we're gonna use a 16-foot board to screed our concrete later, and we'll show you that. But in order to get this level and get our concrete as close to the grass as we can, so we're not building out of the ground, we're gonna dig a trench here, set in our board, and then we'll screw it all together and level it off. One of the advantages of building a shed in a clearing is we're not running into too many roots. Just keep in mind, if you're near a larger tree, you might need to have yourself a Sawzall tool handy to cut through some of these as you go. Set this in. Perfect. Now it's just a matter of setting the right height. So we're at the point where we've got our organics taken care of. We've got our trench built. This is going to be our front ridge board. Now, really want to take a look at the slope of your ground here. Start at your high point on the front of the pad. And the reason being, when you do get a heavy rain and the rain's going to be coming following the grade of the property towards your pad, it's nice if your pad's a couple inches higher than the grass. It's easy to trim when you're cleaning up your grass work, but it's also nice to divert the water around the sides and so it doesn't come over the edge of the pad and then try to infiltrate the structure that we're going to put on top of this pad. Because we're making a shed, we just want to think through what happens in extreme weather so we don't run into problems with thaw-free cycle and crazy storms. So having it elevated is going to be really beneficial. So this is our high side. So we're going to establish our point here about 2 inches above the grass. And we're going to use one of these right there in my corner. And I like that. And this is basically going to be, that's it. That's going to be the height of my pad, off my patio. I'm about 2 inches there. I think I like that. Now, we're going to level all the way across the front using 3 bricks and our big level here. And then we're going to level the back. Okay, now the sides we're just going to screw together, hold it all in, add some stakes, and then we're ready to start doing our backfilling. But first of all, let's just go over to the middle here. Obviously I'm way too low here, so I'm just going to put in a little bit of dirt, lift that up. See if that works. And now I can go, and now I see how much I have to raise this up. Wow, that's pretty substantial. Finally, we have more than we need. I'm just going to wiggle this around until we get it down to where we want it. Perfect. Now, just a quick note, the longer your level, the more accurate it's going to read, especially when you're dealing with lumber. This is a 6 foot, so this works really well in a lot of cases. So now that we have that level, I'm just going to put up the sideboards, throw 1 screw on each end, just to keep the joint closed. Now we're going to go set up at the back side, do the same thing there, only this time we're going to use one of the 16-foot boards, and we're going to level from the front side to the back side and get this all squared off as well. So we've got our 16-foot board here, and this is almost one of these situations where you want 3 hands. I'm going to lift this board now, and I'm going to find out roughly how much I have to build up before I get too crazy. There we go, that's level. Amazing, eh? Wow, just a little bit more than that brick standing on end. That'll give you an idea of how much buildup we have to have back here. I'm expecting a little bit of weather to get in the shed, so it'd be nice if it had a little bit of a drainage effect off the back end. I am about 3/8 of an inch lower than I should be right now. That's a little bit much, so when I put the level on, I knew I had to bring this board just a little bit higher than that. So I don't really need this board right at the moment. What I'm going to do is just lift this board up flush and then a little bit and drive a screw in to set the corner. Okay, and now we'll go check the other side. That is actually crazy. That's a little bit too high. Wow. Wow. Yeah, that just gets crazy. So you can see we just finished off figuring out that our level is way up here, almost 8 inches off the ground. That's going to involve way too much aggregate and way too much work to fill this hole. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the beginning. We're going to reset our first ridge here, much lower, flush with the grass. Now, we originally talked about the design. We wanted to have it higher than the grass for drainage. So what we've just done is we've decided that because there's so much backfill to go on, after we're done with the pad, we're going to dig out the first 8-10 inches of grass around the perimeter and put in some river stone to fill that up. So that way the ground has a natural drainage around our slab. We can accomplish the same thing doing that way. And it'll also help to remove the amount of aggregate and work that's going to be necessary to fill this hole. Let's start all over again. Okay, so now we basically have our frame all figured out. One last step we have to do with the framing, and that's square it all off and then put in our posts. We want to add a couple of little 2x2 stakes just around the perimeter to help keep things from flexing underneath the weight of all of the aggregate and cement that we're putting in here. Other than that, we're pretty much good to go. We have some reinforced steel that we're going to put in as well after we put in our stone, and that is going to be just to provide this slab with some strength, because we do have 4-season weather here, and when the ground freezes, it'll help hold it in one piece and it'll raise and fall together in the winter time. And that'll be really important because basically it freezes around the outside first, and as the frost line creeps in, the ground starts to lift, and you want your slab to lift together and then settle together. So the reinforcement on anything outside is super, super important. Now, to square this off, it's time to get a little bit of Pythagoras theorem going. I know that sounds scary, that's math, right? So what we're looking for is combinations of 3, 4, and 5. So 3 feet on one side, 4 feet on the other side. Then the other side of that triangle should be 5. So if we go 6, 8, and 10, that's what we should be looking for. Wow. I'm only a 1/4 inch off. And since it's a slab and it's outside, I think that's about as square as I need to make that today. Fantastic eyeballing job. Woohoo! I want 1 on the short side, 2 on each of the long sides, 1 on that short side. I got extra ones. Yeah, we're just gonna drive them in here. That works. So back here, the ground's a little tough, so I made myself a little Dracula steak. Gotta love having a skill saw on the job. And here, yeah, that's gonna work. That's gonna be awesome. The best thing about concrete, folks, it's not art, it's just science. So I'm just gonna backfill this dirt here that we pulled out of the way, back to where it came from. And then it's time to get the wheelbarrow out and get the stone shoveled in here. Before you know it, it's gonna be time to pour concrete. All right, now what we have here is 1/2 inch clear stone, and you're gonna find, most cases residential, they're gonna drop this off in your front yard, and you're gonna have to bring it back here. And you can either bring it back when it's time to fill the pit, or you can do some of this work in advance. So just remember, when you're ordering stone delivery, make sure you understand the context of the contract. Are they dropping it at the end of your driveway so that you can't get your car out? Make sure you're prepped and ready to go for that. Because most cases, these delivery services are just drop it at the driveway and go. And it only takes them less than 5 minutes. And if you're not paying attention, they'll be done and gone before you realize that you got a lot of shoveling to do in order to go pick up the kids from school. And just keep in mind too, the cost of the stone's 2-yard purchase, 36 bucks. It'll vary depending on your region, but it's about the same kind of price, right? And it's the delivery that costs the money. But if you were to bring this much stone back in bags from a building store, it would cost you maybe $400 or $500 for the same amount of stone if they package it in plastic for you. So for that kind of money, you can buy yourself a handy dandy wheelbarrow like this with 2 wheels, and it's so much easier to work with. Bloop. Do-do-do. Do-do-do. So I've got about 20 trips of the stone, and then we'll be able to set a rebar. Woo. Just remember, one of the advantages of moving all your stone onto a blue tarp is when you're almost done, you can empty out all of what's left and not leave a mess on your yard. Ta-da! When you're raking out your stone, don't be too particular about whether it's 2 inches or 3 inch depth. We're just trying to get it in the ballpark. Remember, we're putting just a shed on here, so it's not like we're supporting the weight of an entire house. We just want to have it somewhat level. Make sure it's pushed in all the corners. You won't have cement oozing out all over the ground. Okay, so our steel grid here is 4 by 8 feet. We made our box 12 feet wide. it's kind of a no-brainer. We're gonna put in 3. Now the reason I'm putting it primarily to the front is that in this shed, our design is the front couple of feet are gonna be exposed to the elements, where the back is all inside the shed. And honestly, if we get a crack in the floor in the back of a shed, it doesn't really matter. But up front, we really want to do everything we can do to make sure that this stays in one piece. We are all ready to mix our cement. Now, I call me old-fashioned, but I like to bring my work to where I'm working, so we set up our mixer in the pit with our concrete, and we're gonna bring the water over here. And we're just gonna fill left to right, front to back, so every couple of feet at a time, and we'll screed it, and then we'll move the machine over after we've deleted some bags, and we'll just keep doing that until we work our way out of the pit. Now, I think we're gonna need a lot more concrete than we see here right now, but it's just nice to get started where it's convenient. Remember, read instructions. Back of the bag says it takes 2.7 liters of water for every bag of concrete. This mixer is a 1 bag at a time deal, and it's really simple. We put the contents in here, water first, concrete second, open up the, pour it out on the ground, rake it around. Rinse, repeat, as April Wilkerson would say. We're gonna do that probably around 45, 50 times, and then we'll have a nice finished pad. We're also going to smooth it out as we go. So we'll screed it, and then I just brought whatever tile trowel I had laying around. I got a nice flat, smooth edge on it, and we'll give the concrete a nice smooth finish before we move on too far. So anyway, we're just gonna use this measuring cup to figure out our 2.7 liters, make a black mark on our pail so that we can do the same thing over and over again and have some continuity with our concrete. Really, life is that simple sometimes. We're going to work with that. All right. We don't need the pitcher anymore, but we do need our black marker. And find a level spot. Wow. There we go. That actually shows up from the inside. Okay. Beautiful. So now we're going to give this machine its inaugural run. Now Max picked this up at a local store, and it was a floor model. It did not come with instructions. So bear with us while we try to figure out how this thing operates. Let's see, we'll just push the green button and see what happens. Oh yeah. All right, we'll get this bad boy turned on. We do not have the ability to lock this in place. I think this is gonna be a long day. That's not so bad. It has a mind of its own. This is awesome. Just going to put it on a bit of an angle here so that it'll mix thoroughly through. All right. Wow. I'm thinking we're going to have to do this on a time-lapse video so I can get Max to help me. This is a two-man operation. So I think obviously the 2.7 liters per bag, those are directions if you're mixing it by hand in a wheelbarrow. Using this kind of machine, you're going to use a little bit more water, or it just won't mix up properly. Part of that's because it's leaking, but I think part of it's just the nature of how this tumbles. Anyway, that's all right. Let's just get at it, because that's a lump of cement right there, and we got to get moving this thing around. So you can see we are almost halfway through mixing our concrete. It's been a little over an hour. Just wanted to take a minute now and discuss some of the techniques that we're using here. I figured it was easier for you to see the process and then we could discuss it, so it kind of made sense. We are using a 16-foot piece of lumber as our screed board, and it basically runs from ridge to ridge and creates a flat surface. And just like when we're doing drywall mud or any other kind of finishing, we start from rough and push towards finish. Okay? Now this is a lot easier with a second person, like you saw in the other footage, but now he's holding the camera. So that's the process. Once you get done to a certain point where you don't have holes to fill, you just jump to the other side and then come back with a lot of movement. And you can see that's how you get your surface. If you get any potholes or that sort of thing, just take a handful, shove it in and go again, okay? It's that simple. Once we were done our screeding, I was just taking my trowel, and this is actually used for doing tile work, but what it has one straight edge right here. And I'm using this to act as my float. And you'll see that when you run it over the surface, it magically makes everything smooth. All right? After about 45 minutes, the concrete sets up, and then you can just take your big shop broom and lightly drag it across the concrete. Now, if you have a big nasty chunk of debris, that kind of wrecks the look. Now, that puts a texture on the concrete so that it's not slippery in the wintertime or when it rains. And generally, it makes all of the little ripples go away. So this isn't quite as old, and you can see when I run the broom, it does an okay job, but it's grabbing chunks of rock and pulling it up out of the cement. And you don't want that. So if that happens to you, pull this out, take your trowel, smooth it off again, give it another 15 or 20 minutes, and come back to the broom, you'll be good to go. Call me crazy, but when I'm working out in this kind of heat, I like to wash everything up about once every hour or so. It just makes it a lot easier at the end. Nothing's baked on. Besides, on a day like today, a little bit of spray off the hose never hurts. So there we go. That's all the tips and tricks for working with a cement slab that I've got for you. The only other thing we're going to do is at the end of the video, we're going to come back tomorrow and we're going to hammer off all of the boards and reveal the finished slab. So we're going to get back to work now and turn the camera off, and we'll catch you in a minute. Okay, well, we're back out on our pad here. This is pretty awesome. It's been a few days, and as you can see, there was a fence company that came by and put up the fence between the neighbors, and that's why we gave this a few days before we got back. We wanted to make sure that they had a chance to get everything done and get out of the way. We're just back here today. We got to take out all of our supports and pull off our boards. Here we go. There we go. Yeah, I do have a screw in there. Fantastic. Just a little bit of a vibration is all it takes, and you can pull these things right out. We got ourselves, here we go. The irony is, we originally only had 50 bags. It wasn't enough. So we went and grabbed another 10, and this little lump here that represents the extra. Boy, I talk about measuring close, eh? All right. Here we go. Well, my assistant and I are out here taking a look at the pad now. Just wanted to go over a couple of basic details. This is a 10 by 12 foot slab. It took a full ton of gravel and 60 bags of cement to get this finished. So give you an idea of the kind of volume you're looking at for a 3-inch pour. you can use that sort of math. You can also go to the stone yard and you can give them the size and square footage and the depth that you're going to work with, and they've got a little calculator on their computer and they can formulate your stuff for you. This was actually poured over 2 days because we were running short. So what we did is we poured this whole section and across the front, and then after it had set for about an hour and a half, we managed to broom that and got a pretty good look. The second day, this was done, so that's why you see the line. It doesn't really matter. We're building a shed and it's going to be 7 by 10. So all of the second part of the pour is going to be inside the shed. We're not concerned. Visually, this is still going to be stunning. And just really glad. This little machine over here was awesome. We're really pleased because we didn't expect it to make it through the whole process. We thought we'd be mixing the last few bags in the wheelbarrow, but it held up really great. So kudos to that machine. If you're in the market for a cement mixer, these little 1 bag at a time, they're good little machines. And so if you're wondering about the Dunsworth, the funny story here is Max was actually inspired to do cement work. He was watching a video by an actor who was in the Trailer Park Boys series, and he lives out east and done a bunch of concrete work at his house. And so Max was like, I got to get me a cement mixer and I'm going to do some concrete work. So when the idea came up to put the shed together, Max was like, oh, I'm going to make this huge pad for my house. And so he bought this machine. And so since it stood up to the test of time, he's nicknamed it the Dunsworth in honor of the actor. So I think that's pretty darn cool. So now that the pad's complete, we're ready to go to our next step. The weather is favorable and it's time to start framing. When you're framing on a concrete slab, you need 2 different kinds of wood. One is you need regular spruce lumber, and the other one is you need pressure treated, okay? And the reason you want pressure treated lumber is because the building code allows for you to use this as your bottom plate in direct contact with concrete so that it won't suck up the moisture through the concrete and into your wall. When you build like this, you actually have a moisture barrier between your concrete and your spruce so that the mold that's naturally occurring in wood cannot grow. This is very important because whether you're outside on a concrete pad like we are, or you're framing in your basement, it's the same science. And if you build like we're going to show you today, you'll be able to frame anything in your house. So one of the things we like to do on our channel is show you techniques and tips and tricks that involve basic tools, because most homeowners or do-it-yourselfers don't have an array of tools to work with. So for instance, on a lot of framing videos, you'll see people working with the automatic nailing guns, and those are great. And if you got one, by all means, help yourself. It'll speed things up a little bit. But the reality is they're running around $400. And if you don't have a good compressor, or you don't have an extra $400 to put into the cost of building just a shed, you don't want to go and buy one of those things. So we're going to show you techniques, basic drill and screws, and we're also going to show you how to use a hammer and nails. I know it's a little old school, but the fact is it's about the same speed. So whatever you're more comfortable using, we're going to show you how to do both. But before we get started, let's just think you want to have the design of your shed. Now typically I've seen all kinds of sheds, they're built like barns. All the walls are the same size, they have gable ends, and they've got a peak roof like this. But the reality is that's a lot of work to build a shed with that kind of roof design. So what we're going to do is a little bit different. So I'm going to give you an idea of what's going to happen. Let's say from this post to this post is the side of our shed. And this is about an 8 foot tall. We're going to build it with the wall on the back side of the shed at 7 feet and the wall at the front at 8 feet. So we have a slope. That'll facilitate our removing of the water to the back side of the shed, but it also makes it really easy to build, and you only have to build one slope for the roof. This is why I'm going to show you this technique today, because building a shed doesn't have to be a work of art, it has to be functional. And the first rule of design is make sure it functions. There's no need to make all kinds of extra work and all kinds of extra design elements in building a shed with 2 different slopes on the roof. So by doing one slope, we can actually save a lot of money because we don't have gable ends that we have to use extra materials and throw in the garbage. And that'll save you time and money, and it'll give you a great look. So we're going to finish this off with a nice little pressure treated 1x5 running around the edge of the roof. You aren't going to see any roofing. It's going to be sleek, it's going to be sexy, it's going to function, it's going to be cheap, it's going to be quick. Stay with us. So we've just cut our boards, we've got our layout here. We've got 2x4s, pressure treated, 10 foot long. And then these ones we've cut back so that our total exterior is 7 feet. The The reason we're doing that is our design element actually takes into place, our roof is going to extend out to the front edge of the slab, have a couple of posts to pick up the weight, and you also have a sitting area out front as well. And I'm sure the dog will appreciate having a nice cool shaded area to sit all day long. Our elements here are basically simple. We're going to have a door in the middle, we're going to have a window on each side, and we're going to have a cheater door back here that swings open. You can bring the lawnmower in from the back side. The reason we're doing that is because if you can bring the lawnmower in up against an outside wall, you're going to actually save a ton of space. Having to bring your lawnmower in through the main door makes everything dirty all the time, and it keeps you from having a clean shed because you need room for moving it around, or it's just always in the way. So we're going to have a little cheat door here. It'll be almost like a hidden door with a little side ramp. We're going to build that separately. But let's get back to framing. We need to lay out. You need to understand what it is you're going to build. So the way you lay it out is simple. Basically, it's all about visualization. For us, we don't have a plan we're working off. It's all coming out of here. So we're going to go with our 10 foot by our 7 foot. That is simple. And we are going to just cut our plate, put it in place, get an idea. Am I going to be happy with that? Is that big enough? Is it small enough? Once you got all those questions done, then you're ready to start. Because this framing here, this plate, this is the first step that you need. Next step you do is you make the same frame for the top of the walls, and you just get all those cut and laid out as well. So in our effort to try to keep things really simple, if you have a skill saw, I'm going to show you a way that you can actually cut all your framing lumber, and then you don't need to set up a chop saw. You just take your measurement, put your mark on the wood, get your little square here, or triangle as I call it, because it kind of looks like a triangle. Anyway, on your saw you're going to have a line where it marks 0, where the blade cuts, and you want to set that up on your pencil mark and then move the triangle right up to the guide, right up to the guard. And I'm going to use this, squeezing it against the frame, to be my cutting guide. So I cut straight through the wood. Now, that gets you a perfectly square cut. Nothing ever binds, nothing's ever on an angle, and everything is always perfect because you're not freehand cutting. So that's a great technique. And if you don't have a chop saw and you want to build a shed or you want to frame your basement, you can use that technique. It only takes a couple seconds to cut. And honestly, it'll save you a few $100s. We have the foundation for our building today. We have all of our walls, top and bottom plate. And now it's just a matter of constructing each individual wall. So we'll take our pieces and we'll set them aside for now, so we have room to build on our pad and then lift everything in place as we go. Now it's very important that when you're framing your wall, you know how to mark it up. And it's easier because we're using pressure treated for the bottom and regular lumber for the top. Otherwise, you should mark it bottom and top just so you don't get confused, especially if you're going to be putting doors or windows in. Basically what you do is get them flush at the end. You run your tape across it. For anybody who doesn't have an understanding of building materials, this is where you really need to understand. The building technique that we use is so that it accommodates the materials that we're going to be installing to finish. So right here is our 48 inches, and this is really important because if our lumber is 1.5 inches thick, then that would represent the full thickness of a piece of wood. This is marked to the middle. Now when we put on our sheet good, it's 4 feet long. We want to have it finish in the middle of a stud so we can nail it, put on the next piece, and have a nailing surface for that one as well. So when you're marking this, we're going to go 4 feet on center, so it's every 16 inches on center. So all of these are going to be on red squares, okay? So you can actually mark the center of all of your sticks, top and bottom, where all these little red squares are, okay? And that'll help make sure that things go well. Now professional framers would frame it this way. They'd go like this, okay, mark 3/4 over, and they'll put an X where the wood is. They'll actually mark the side of the board. Now either one of those techniques works fine as long as you have a system that you're using. Make sure that you can finish with the center of the wood on the red square. That is really the whole secret, buying a good tape measure so that you're able to understand what you're doing without having to do the math as you go along. Okay? And of course, the end of every wall gets a stick as well. That's without saying. And now, this is the center mark. I'm using 2 different systems here just to demonstrate. If you're marking a center, put the little C on so you remember. Okay, that's the center line. Now, all we have to do is add up how many pieces we have. And remember, our back wall is going to be 7 feet at finish. So we have to take our 7-foot measurement minus the bottom plate and a top plate and a second top plate. And the reason we use 2 top plates is because when I stand this wall up, you'll see the frames are 16 inches apart. There's a lot of weight coming from the roof and on this top plate. And if you don't line up all of your rafters of your roof on these studs exactly, then the transfer is going to be in between them. And then these will start to bow. Things will start to come apart and it'll look messy. By doubling up the top plate, you add enough strength to transfer that load over to the sticks. So when you build your roof, you don't have to worry about being perfectly in line with your wall framing, because that'll drive you crazy. The total height of the wall is going to be 7 feet, which is 84 inches, minus 3 pieces of lumber, okay? And they're 1.5 inches each. That makes it 4.5. So 1, 2, 3, 4.5 makes it 79.5 inches. And that's how long our studs are going to be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark down 79.5 on my lumber so I don't forget. And the number of pieces at that length that I need. So now I can come over to my pile and I can make all my marks, and I'm not ever going to forget what my measurement is. Now I'm going to be using a black marker to make all my marks today, just so that it shows up better on the camera. On a bright sunny day like today, it can be really hard to see a pencil mark. So you can see how efficient this is, just having the saw right next to your lumber pile. Pull the square up, grab the saw, line it up, squeeze. Grab the next one. Just remember, anytime you're cutting your lumber like this, anything that's less than 15 or 16 inches, keep it in a separate pile. They'll come real handy later when you're building your stabilizing for your walls, or you're doing little work on the rafters or the sidewall. This kind of stuff is like gold, so keep it organized and don't start getting too ahead of yourself and throwing it all out. So you can see I've got my 9 pieces of wood basically laid out in the location that they're going to go. And all you have to do here is take your top plate, walk it to the other side, and then start nailing everything together. Just remember that with dimensional lumber, every 2 inches of the dimensional lumber gets 1 screw or 1 nail. So 2x4 is 2. If you're building your shed with 2x6 for some weird reason, you want to have it incredibly strong, then make sure you're using 3 fasteners. 2 just won't be enough to keep the studs from twisting over time. All right, so if you've got the center marked, line it up in the center of the wood. And like I said, there's 2 ways to do this. You can screw it, or you can nail it. If you're going to use a hammer and nails, I would suggest that you stand on both pieces of wood. All right, and if you're not used to this, wear steel toe boots in case you miss. I've also seen a lot of people where they'll sit here and hold the wood in place, and they'll swing the hammer like this. Just remember, if you miss, think about what you're going to be hitting. This is a pretty fast technique if you're comfortable with it, and if you're not, just use the screws. So here's a little tip for you. When you're working with the screw gun, one of the benefits is if you have a piece of wood that's twisted, you can line up the bottom, okay, screw it in, and then you can use this claw that's on the back of the framing hammer. Now, not every hammer has this, so I like this hammer for this reason. This little claw here actually gives you the ability to grab the wood and twist it and force it into place either direction, okay? And if it's twisted, just push a little bit past where it's perfect, drive in your screw, and then when you're done, it'll keep your wood nice and straight. All right, well, now that we've got our wall done, we're ready to finish it. What we want to do before we go stand it up into place is actually get the outside skin on. The reason for that is because the board, it's a typical kind of exterior board for sheds. It comes pre-primed. So this is the exterior panel. It's basically designed to look like wood, but it's more of a pressed board. You can take a look at the back there. It's just a chipboard. And the front of it has been manufactured to look like it's all kind of beautiful wood paneling. There's our 48-inch line. That's the middle of that stud. And so what happens is you put the first one on flush with the corner. You can nail all the way up the side of this one, and it's tongue and groove. So it's more like a shiplap, overlap. So the next piece will actually go overlap this and come up to this little raised bump right to here. And it'll also have a nailing surface on that same stud because we set this middle of the stud at the 48-inch, which is right there. So this is going to work out perfect. This is why, if you understand your building materials and how they're installed, and you just follow the framing technique of keep everything on center, 48, you're going to be just fine. Now, these sheets are 8 feet tall, so it's more than what we need, so we're going to go cut it off. The easiest way to do this is just lay it on your wall, grab your level, line it up with the top plate, okay, and make a mark about 1 inch higher, because don't forget we're going to use a second top plate. In this case, I'm just following my shadow because that'll work out well. I'm going to cut here. When you're thinking about your finish cuts for your exterior wallboard, you need to have your entire design plan figured out. We're going to go very New England style here, so we're going to use pieces of 1x3 trim at the corners, at the bottom and the top, just to close everything off, get a nice finished look. So I know I don't have to have my cuts perfect. I just have to have them close and let all the trims do the rest of the work. When you're cutting something thin, adjust the depth of your blade, okay, to something thinner. That'll help you keep your blade from overheating and from going warped on you. Get my 0 on the mark, and I'm going to just follow along, and I want to keep this 0 on my pencil mark the whole time. And we're going to save that for later, just in case. Well, it's important to note, this is a primer, not a finish paint. It's not going to have good protection against the UV. It'll just make sure that while you're building and the following couple of weeks after that, it's not going to get destroyed if you get rain. But it is very important to make sure you paint your finished product. Important to see that my finished floor is here, but I'm bringing the wallboard about 1/4 inch away from the edge. And that's intentional. I don't want to have this wallboard coming in contact with the concrete. Remember, our protection from moisture wicking up is this lumber here. This stuff, I want to make sure I leave that air gap so I don't have direct contact. And all you really have to do here, guys, drive one of your nails. Okay, now because we're going to go, this is the back side first of all, and we're going to get finished trims, you don't have to be exact about getting in here and use a nail punch. You can put these right through the thick part. Okay. Now you'll notice that these grooves are lined up with my nail heads. So these boards are designed that the groove of the board is lined up with everything at 16 inch on center. So I can actually go up and nail the middle of the board in as well, which is perfect. And I know that every second groove is going to have lumber there. Once you understand that building materials are designed to fit together, it's a lot more like Lego, but you got to use a hammer. It's not so intimidating, is it? What I would recommend is use your 16 inches as a rule. Every 16 inches across, you want to put in a nail, and every 16 inches going up as well. Now, one of the best ways that you can drive the head of your nail in, take your screw, put it on the head of that nail, and just drive it like that. Use it like a nail punch. There's another tool you won't need to buy. In order to square your wall off, once you've done nailing the bottom, push this over and get this nice and flush with the outside of your wall. This is the outside corner. You want it nice and flush. Okay, remember, every second groove, there's going to be wood there. Now I don't need to nail this outside edge because I'm going to be overlapping it, and then I'll put the nail in the next piece. Let's get it cut and ready to go. Now here's an interesting fact for you. All of the kits that are out there for building sheds, generally you're using the same board material. So don't fall for the idea that the kit is somehow giving you great value for your dollar. I think you're going to find that when you price this out, this particular way of doing things will actually be a little bit cheaper than buying the kit. Okay. Now this is the same finishing board that the kits from the Home Depot and the Lowe's come with. Just to try to keep everything nice and square here. Now it's like the shiplap, right? It's the overlap. I'm going through both pieces of wood into the stud. So I'm using a bit of an angle just to make sure. The secret here is when you do paint, the head of all these nails is going to get covered and they'll all disappear in the paint job. And again, because we have the overlap, materials are designed to go together, we know that there's going to be wood on the second groove. I'm using a 2-inch hot dip galvanized spiral nail, and the reason I'm using that is because it is an exterior nail, and I like to have a little bit of meat in the material that I'm attaching the wall to. You could go with something shorter if you like, but I like this one because of the size of the head. Now, the way that we're going to measure the last board is from the outside coming in, okay? And remember, this groove has got this little detail. We know exactly the size. So it's coming in at 23 3/4. Should be exactly the same on the other side if we're at all square. 23 3/4. Woo! I'm about a 16th off. Woo! Okay. Because we're finishing the outside corners with wood, we're going to take a little bit off on purpose. So we're going to go 23 5/8 instead, just to make sure I got a nice fit and it's easier to put my brace on later. Now, remember, we have a 10-foot wall on the front of the building as well. And this is just a little bit less than 24 inches we're cutting off, which means the other half of this we're going to want to save for the front of the building. I want to measure from the lip of that detail, 23 5/8. And you'll see it's just next to my groove. So instead of marking a line, I'm just going to follow with my saw blade and cut that off. Important to note before you cut your next board, the front of this building is going to be a full 8 feet. So we wanted to cut this off before we cut the height. We're going to nail the bottom in. Then I'm going to nail the top on the other side. Make sure that my joint is closed here before I get too carried away. I'm going to teach everybody here a little trick. How to lift up your wall by yourself and install your bracing without having it collapse on you. Basically, we're going to put one screw into here, not very tight, and it'll act kind of like a hinge. All right, so when I lift the wall up, this piece of wood will stay on the ground. I'll do another screw like a hinge on the other side. After I lift it up, I can grab this piece. It'll be hinged. I can lift it up, screw it into the wall, and it'll hold everything in place.
So in order to do that, we want to just mark back half of the depth of the 2x4, which is 3.5, and that is 1 3/4. Okay, so 1 3/4 there, 1 3/4 here. That is exactly the midpoint of both of those boards. And if we throw one screw in that place, and this will hold it in the perfect position. Now watch, you pull that back on the board a bit. When you unscrew, hold it open. Now it's a hinge. Okay, do the same on the other end. Here's the crazy part. In order for this to work, I have to have this board like this, right? So you want to get an idea of where you want it to be, and then just drop it down, and then throw a screw in here too. Nice and loose. Okay, now everything moves independently. Now we just lift the wall. Now watch the hinge part. See, nothing happens there. Okay, I'm gonna come over holding my wall now. And I am going to intentionally have the wall leaning in just a little bit. And I want that because I don't want it to have the propensity to fall the other direction right now. That would be bad. Okay, there we go. That's not going anywhere. Because we built the wall with stock lumber, now I can put my second plate up after the fact, right? And I can actually screw it from underneath, but I should find a straight one. Here we go. La, la, la. Just remember, when you get materials delivered, they're intentionally not getting the best stuff in the pile. And the reality is, I see guys there all day long, checking every piece of lumber, going through that pile like somehow they deserve the best wood in the world. Listen, they're gonna get it home, they're gonna put it outside, it's gonna rain that night. It'll be just as twisted as everything else. Do yourself a favor and don't waste your time. As long as you know how to tie everything together. Crooked lumber, straight lumber, it's all the same thing. So here we go, that's a 7-foot high shed on the back wall. Now listen, you don't need to have a 6-foot wall with an 8-foot peak and back to a 6-foot wall again and make a really short entrance. We're gonna go 7 here, 8 feet out here. You're gonna have tons of space. You can have storage above your head when you're inside the shed. This is a great design because now every part of this wall is no taller than the height of that panel right out of the factory. This is important because if you make a gable wall with a peak, now you have to make your whole shed really low, or you're gonna be buying extra pieces of that exterior board in order to cap the triangular gable on the top. So this is why this design works, and it's real quick and simple. Now Max is gonna go grab me some lunch, and while he's gone, we'll throw it on time lapse, and I'll just keep on building, and we'll see you when he gets back. All right, well, now that I got that corner attached, I'm just bringing all this in line and using screws to tighten it all together. This is awesome because screws will actually pull things closed. So the way we're going to finish the last wall is we're going to build it in place on the ground. We're going to just open up the walls more than 90 degrees by measuring off our 10-foot board. There we go. So let's just get a quick update here, what we're doing. This is our back wall. This is our 7-foot cut double plate, because that's going to be the back side of our sloped roof. That'll transfer load onto these like I was talking about. The side walls are attached, screwed in the corners, and opened up nice and wide so we can actually build our front wall inside this space. I attached the skin with an overhang on both sides so that when I put this wall up, I can close this gap and nail it together, okay? And that'll leave my front face flush to this corner and that corner, and then we'll put the trim boards on. The reason these are cut full length is because our roof line goes something like this, right? On an angle. And until we get the front wall built and we have that angle defined, I don't want to try to cut that board. It's easier to do after the fact. Use a reciprocator. We can get that mark cut and then go at it from the inside. It'd be just fine to do that before we put the roof on. Then we're going to just add a little bit of stick framing inside that as well. Okay, so let's not get ahead of ourselves. We're going to build the front wall. It's a full 8 feet. Our lumber that we bought was actual 8-foot stick. If you have lumber available in your area and it's 82 5/8, then you can buy that plus the top and bottom plate. Gets you to 96. Sorry, 92 5/8 plus the top and bottom is 96. That'll work out fine too. Then you're going to add the second top plate for the structural issue that I was talking about. And if there's a gap with the front skin and the top, it doesn't matter because we're going to be adding the 1x4 boards everywhere to cover up our gaps and to make it all look pretty. So you have lots of flexibility, which is why this design is perfect for the homeowner. Now, we're going to build the front wall. And the reason we stopped our production here to talk to you on camera is because we're going to do a door and 2 windows. Now, without getting into too much detail, there's a variety of different types of window you can buy for a shed. You can buy them so you have a regular case window and it has a nailing flange on it. And I think if you buy, or have seen other videos, there's windows that come with some of the shed kits. It has the nailing flange and it goes over top of this board and then you nail that nailing flange on and it looks ugly. What we're going to do is we're actually getting a window. It's designed, it's called a shed window. It's at Home Depot. It's part of their stock inventory. And it has a exterior window casing, like a jamb. And it sits wider than the window. So when you're looking at them, there's going to be a measurement. It'll say 15 by 39, okay, is one of them. The 15 measurement is actually the width of the exterior of the window. The casement part that's inside, that goes between your studs, is actually, I think it's only a 12. So this window you can cut into any stud bay, and you can just, if you're not worried about your design or you're just looking to get a bit of daylight in there, you can just take any stud bay, trace out the 39 inches, cut it with the saw, drop the skin off and then stick that window in, all right, and throw a couple screws from the inside and you're done and you're good to go. What we're going to do though is, because we're worried about the design features here, we're actually centering our door and then adding 2 windows. So instead of measuring left to right on this wall, we're actually going to start from the center going in both directions so that our stud bays are perfectly symmetrical with the door, and then we don't have to get into too much creative framing. And then it'll make it easier to nail the skin on afterwards. So we're going to go with this particular shed. We're going to use a traditional barn door style. So we're going to make a nice 32-inch opening with a 34-inch door. So what I want to do is first, I want to take this measurement. Let me just get this out of the way. And these are 10-foot pieces of lumber. This is stock. So we can just go mark our 5 foot as our center line. Yeah, that's a little rough and sloppy. Okay, we're gonna get our square here. Okay, there's our center line. Now, 32-inch door, right? That's 16 inches. We put that on our center line and we're gonna mark there and we're gonna mark 32. Okay, then we'll take our square and we'll translate that number across and we'll put the X, which is where the lumber will go. So that'll represent the finished hole. Because we're actually nailing on a wood panel as a skin, we don't need to double up on the studs here because it's not a hinge. So we'll just go with 1 stud, okay? And then we're going to say this is the rest of our space. Now, we're going to measure 16 inches this way, all right? Now, if we go here and here, that would represent a window. That leaves me with 12 inches on the other side. But for me, the window is a little bit too far to the right. I would rather have a 12-inch gap here and a 16 over here. So I'll start there, measure in 16, okay, and then 32,
and this will be my window. Okay, that I think will look a lot better. We'll do the same on the other side. So outside coming in 16 and then 32, and then we'll mark the outside of that for the studs, and that'll be my window placement. So now you can see we have the center of our wall for our door, frame to here. There'll be a section of wall, and then our window. And because we measured from the outside on both sides, everything on this is going to be completely symmetrical. Again, sometimes you just got to stop and think, how is it going to finish? If you just go left to right the whole time, you'll have windows staggered off to the side and it'll look stupid. So sometimes when you're doing features like this, it's easier to measure from the middle going out. Anyway, because we're going to go with an 8-foot wall, which is the size of our board, which is dictating our design, top plate, bottom plate, and the next plate off an 8-foot stick, I'm taking 4 inches off. That'll leave me a little bit extra gap, and that's fine. Man, is it ever hot today? I'll tell you, we sure don't get that dry heat that get down in the south around here. Around here, it's always that kind of heat that just makes you sweat just by opening up your eyes. All right, it's over 100 degrees right now? Yeah. Holy crap. So I've got a 10-foot wall section here. And I have it set up where this wall is going to go into this. So the skin, if it's flush there, comes to the corner here. Perfect, right? So what I'm doing is I am basically setting this up eyeball. So I'll put the 2 big pieces on, and then I'm going to try to line up the header of the door and see if I can arrange this somehow where everything is going to work out perfect. We'll see. Because I hate putting the skin all the way over the whole door and then cutting it all out. That's almost perfect. Wow. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this out on the lawn. I'm going to nail this piece on to square off the wall. I'm going to use this as my measuring template and then line this up so that the lines are in the right spot. Then I'll nail this one down, and then I'll cut this one to install in the gap. And then it'll be beautiful. Woo! We're going to just set this where it goes. Leave a little room there. We want to just get this where it's supposed to go and have these grooves lined up. Here we go. So when we got all this cut and installed, it's going to look really pretty. I'm going to cut this much here. I want to create the overlap effect. So I'm going to actually try to cut this back a little bit so that when I break this off, I want to have a little bit of the backside of this to go underneath this edge. So I didn't bury that nail. I'll try to now I don't need a whole lot, just a little bit, and you'll see what I mean. Just enough to get that look. Bam. That'll be perfect. I got my mark here, so I'm going to put my 0 line on it. All right. I'm going to place my finger beside the board. We're going to do the rip, and I've pulled this about 6 inches off the edge of the board. I'm going to put my 0 on my mark, set the end down, and put my fingers. I'm going to hold the plate. I'm going to come back here, use my fingers as the guide. Perfect. So let's put this panel in first.
Time to get our last wall in place. That's not going to go anywhere. All right, here we go. One more screw, just so this thing doesn't fall down. I love how that pulls everything nice and tight together. Done. Okay, whew. It's been a busy day. It's a hot day, but we got our walls up. We're just gonna have to get this squared, get it attached to the concrete, and then tomorrow we'll worry about the roof, because like always, it looks like it's gonna rain. Typical when you order materials, we had enough. All right, the dimensions here is it's 7.5 feet deep and it's 10 feet across the front. And there was just enough of this material to finish this off. Except that panel over there is going to be a door, and I'd like to have it all in one piece instead of my leftovers, because it'll provide structural integrity for whatever framing I use for that door. So in hindsight, I should have left one of the panels on the back wall off, and then I could have scabbed on the leftover pieces since it's not visible anyway. Because the front, I've had it in the back of my head, I'll just use the leftovers on the front. But because we measured from the center to get all the symmetry perfect, I didn't want to have these lines messed up. And so that's left me in this predicament. So just advice for yourself. Yeah, it's nice to have all the skin on before you put the wall up, but if you're going to be doing this exact design, keep at least one sheet off the back wall for the door area, and then you can use your pieces on your back wall. Just a little tip for you. So yours can be better than mine. All right, so now you can start to see this taking shape. 8 feet on the front, 7 on the back. This will represent our roof structure. We're going to go with 10-foot 2x4s on a 12-inch center. That'll transfer more than enough load back to each of these walls, and then we'll be able to cap all that in some pressure-treated sienna brown wood, so it'll have a finished wood exterior framing that whole roof line. It'll be really cool. But you get an idea, we're going to have a little bit of cutoff here, all right? And then where it's shy, it doesn't matter, because we're going to be framing in like a picture frame, New England style 1x4 trims, and that's going to be amazing. So all in all, you can start to see how this design is going to work out. We're going to have the roof extend about 4 inches on this side and almost 2 feet on the other side, so we have an outdoor covered area. You can put things outside, you know, storage, firewood, that sort of thing. Yeah, really liking the way this is coming together. Very versatile, very quick, very cheap. Okay, so the last part of our framing of the shed is actually to square it off and then get it attached to the concrete. And this is very important. There are a lot of areas around the world where it gets quite windy. And so you don't want to just set your shed in the background or put it on a floating floor. I mean, if you want to put it on a floating deck, that's fine, but check your building codes and make sure it's allowed. We're actually going to be attaching it to the concrete pour just as an added protection so that we don't have damage from wind. And really, it's not that hard to do. Since we squared off the pad, we just put these in here, right? Try in both directions. Make sure it's at least a nice, decent, regularly snug fit. I checked all the corners already, did a couple of wiggles. Now we're ready to go. And so we're going to go through a couple of options here that we have. One, of course, it's the same system we use in basements in a lot of cases. Both of these options are available. One of them is just a hammer drill and tap-down screws. And the bit comes in the package with the Phillips screw. Just remember, the reason we build our walls with the plates fully intact, even though we have door areas, is because after we've attached everything to the ground, then we'll cut out the plates. This helps to make sure that everything is level and plumb and square before we cut holes for our doors, so the doors install quite easily. So don't go doing that rookie mistake and drilling in where the door is going to be. Go to the stud just next to the edge of the door, and then we can drill it in. Now, this DeWalt is amazing. It has an impact hammer drill on it and at high speed. And I just set this right in there so that it makes a bit of noise. Don't be afraid to use your mirror protection here. Now, you'll notice the best way to use Tapcon is apply pressure and go all the way in until it's completely buried. You want the hole as deep as your screw. Very important. And if you start cleaning it out as you go, you'll actually make the hole too big, because this is all vibrating down there and the tip here is just going to make a mess of the hole. You want to have to force that screw in there. If you're not forcing your screw in, it's not really grabbing, and it's not going to do the job you want it to do. The other option is a little bit more fun for all you gun enthusiasts out there. It's a 22 caliber explosive hammer. I like using the number 4s. It's because they make a nice big bang. Being from Canada, we don't get to use too many explosives and that sort of thing, so it's kind of fun for us to get an excuse to use our hammer. Now, this one's a trigger. Not the old-fashioned one you had to hit with a hammer and you always broke your wrist with it. Make sure before you put the nail in, there's nothing, no explosive charge in the chamber. You just put that in there up to the orange. Why am I holding a nail? Put your little bullet in there, all right? And then before you go getting crazy, this one you definitely want to use hearing protection. It's loud. This is the first time I've had a chance to use this new toy with the trigger. I've always had a semi-automatic or the single shot. So the directions say just to press it down, push it as far as you can go, then pull the trigger. Woohoo! Well, that was easy. I wonder how loud it is without the ear protection. Whoa, that's pretty loud. I think I'm gonna wear the ear protection. I love this new trigger. I mean, it only takes about, I don't know, maybe 15 pounds, 20 pounds of pressure to get down to the end of that. And I mean, that nail was buried in there really good. Gotta love my job. Fire in the hole! I love my job. All right. Well, that concludes everything to deal with building the walls. Next time we come, we'll focus on building our roof system. Now, this is awesome. No shingles necessary, no sheet metal. You're gonna love it. So if you've been following along in our video series for how to build a shed, this will be a lot easier to understand. And if you're just joining this because you're looking for information on a slope roof, I'll just go recap real quick. What we've got is a simple box. The back wall is shorter than the front wall. So what we have is about a foot raise on the front, higher than the back. So we're gonna build our roof completely out of 2x4s. Now it's about an 8-foot structure. It's closer to 7.5, but we're gonna build a 10-foot roof so we have an overhang on the front just to help keep all of the door area free from wind and rain and snow and that sort of thing, to help extend its life, because we are going to put on a barn door and it's not going to seal up as well as you would usually have it. So with this extension, you have the ability to make it bigger than the shed. You can do an overhang on one side, you can have it hang out the back more, you can balance the middle. It doesn't really matter because the basic design of this roof is one slope with a finished deck board trim on it. You can go with pressure treated or cedar. And the idea is to keep it simple, keep it cost effective, but most importantly, to keep everything in the shed dry. So I've developed this system. It's really, really, really idiot proof. I use it all the time when I'm building my sheds because it's nice and quick and you don't have to climb on the actual roof hardly at all in order to get it done. So in order to get started, we have to finish the process of the sides, okay? Because we have a slope. So we're gonna use our 2x4 just as a marker up against our exterior wall board. And I'm gonna trace and cut it, and then we're gonna be able to install our roof. All right, here we go. Now, because we're gonna finish off all of our shed with trim boards, we're not concerned if the board isn't quite as high as the 2x4. And so I'm just gonna trace the top of that board, get this out of my way. I'm gonna keep in mind that because I'm working above my head with a saw, my cut line is on 0. I'm gonna cut about a 1/4 inch below that black mark, just so that when I'm putting the roof up, I'm not pulling the sides off the wall by accident. I don't want it too close. I want lots of room here. We're going to set the depth of our blade so we're not cutting too deep. And we're going to line this up, pull the guard forward, activate our safety squints, and off we go. So now we have the slope of our roof all figured out. Not going to be a concern. Just to take note, when you're building your structure and you're going with a roof like this, it's going to carry a little bit of load if you have winter time. So we're actually putting our joists here every 10 to 12 inches on center, okay? I think here we'll go with 12. It should be plenty. Over 8 foot, it should pick up enough load. It won't be an issue. If you find it a little bit soft, all you have to do when you're done is add one more board underneath and screw it to all the joists so that no matter where you step, you're transferring the load to the entire structure. That's a simple engineering trick we use when we're adding too much weight to a living room or something. Anyone who's getting a grand piano installed, we always add a couple of floor joist supports underneath. Next, we double up the plates on both sides so that any weight is going to come from these joists no matter where they land, and it can be transferred through double thick into these studs. Of course, we're on a concrete base here, so everything is going to be good. It's way overkill, all right? But when you can do something overkill, simple and cheap, you do it. So the best way to design a roof is that all of the ends of the roof are perpendicular to the ground. Aesthetically, it's pleasing, it looks really nice, but now you're dealing with tricky angles. So if you don't have the kind of chop saw and special equipment to measure and transfer all those angles, that's okay. I'm going to show you a simple little trick that you can get your angles perfect, and all you need is a skill saw. And what we want to do here is we just want to measure from the ground to the top of our plate on both sides. It's 84 1/4. This one is 96 1/2. We're going to just write that down on a scrap piece real quick before we forget. 1/4, 96 1/2. Now we're going to take that, we're going to do the math on it, okay? 84 1/4 off of that. So that leaves me with 1/4, and that leaves 80. I have 12 1/4 difference in height. I'm going to take that information and I'm going to show you my trick. So I'm going to just show you real quick some basics of grade 8 math. If you can remember all of this, you're going to be awesome. If this is square, remember, put the little square in the corners. All right, that means this angle is the same as this one. Now, if I go like this and I draw this line, which is going to be my roof, okay, and I count that as 0, since this is square, that's 0. The distance from here to here, if I translate it here, okay, I draw that line. Now, this angle is exactly the same as this angle. Simple, right? Because it's like a parallelogram. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that difference that we have. We measured out 12 1/4, and I am going to put this mark here, 12 1/4. All right. That's my spot. I'm going to drive a nail in there. All right. Now, okay, so now I've got my nail there. And I'm going to put, and the only reason this works is because we started level. Remember, we installed our pad level. So I can actually put this 2x4 on the corner back there. Oh, if it's curved the right way. And there's my angle. Now that that's established my angle, I'm going to just trace this onto my wood, holding the markers flat against the board. Okay, now there's my angle. We're done with all this now. Now what I have to do is I have to cut this so that I can invert it. Put that angle on my 2x4s. We're going to cut this off just by using the guide, following this straight line on the saw. Now remember, if you're out 1/8 of a degree on this, no one's going to see that from my house. Here we go. So now I have my angle. I'm going to take this and flip it over and put it to the top corner of all my 2x4s, measure, mark it, and cut it, and then I'm going to have my entire rafter package cut to exactly the same degree before I put it up. That enables me to put my end plate on, build the base of the structure with 3 or 4 sticks. That's something I can carry. I can lift it up onto the roof, and then I can go back and put all the rest of the rafters in later.
All right, let's just get a quick recap so we're all on the same page here. We've got a 8-foot deep structure by 10 feet long, and we're gonna make our roof 10 feet deep and 12 feet long. One of the ways we're gonna do that is we're gonna set this structure up, the roof. We're gonna just do like an outside frame, something small and simple that we can lift up into place, and then we'll finish off all of the rafter framing once we have the box up there. Remember, because we're going 12 feet, we're gonna have an overhang. Let's say this represents the outside of the structure. The last couple feet, we wanna support it with boards going this way, so that the weight can be transferred into the outside wall of the building. And it'll be cantilevered because this side will be down with the plywood, and it'll kind of do the job. And if you find that it's not enough, you can always add a support post. But for what we're gonna do today, we're just gonna do a quick little cantilever system. Hopefully that's enough. Maybe in the wintertime, you might have to get the old snow rake out and pull that clean, but not a big deal. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna just start marking this off. We got our front and our rear. So when we're building a roof, it's very similar to the wall, all right? What we have is we have both plates, but since it's a roof, we'll call them rim joists. And we're gonna just take out our tape and we're gonna measure, like I said, every 12 inches. Now, if you wanna go every 16 and you're strong enough that you can lift a 2x6 frame up into the roof that's 9 feet in the air, you go ahead and knock yourself out. But I'm getting old and I like to play a little on the safe side. I would rather install a few more rafters later and have a much lighter box putting up into place. So we're just gonna mark all the 12s. And on my tape, I have little black boxes instead of red boxes for the 12s. Makes my life really simple. 9, and there's 10. Now 10 is interesting. This represents the last rafter that we're gonna put in this direction. And then after that, we're gonna do our overhang. Okay, so this is my box. 9, 8. So that's the outside of the building. This is the last rafter I'm gonna put on. I'm gonna build this ladder section and lift it into place later. So what I need is I want to establish the outside. On that one, we'll do this one on the outside. And then we'll put this one. Skip a couple here. So what I'm doing is I'm building a box with 6 pieces of wood with the intention of lifting this box off, transporting it over here, and then putting it up on the roof. I'm comfortable with 6 2x4s. That's not going to be too much weight for me. If I do the whole thing first, it might be a little bit too much and too awkward, and I really just don't want to risk an injury. So what I'm going to do, okay, so we'll take this one, put this plate down here. Now we're just going to tack this together real quick. Just 2 screws, just like you're framing a wall. Remember, these are angled, so just make sure you pay enough attention that all your angles are going in the same direction. That'll be really important when it comes time to put the sheathing on. Sheathing comes in 8-foot lengths, and so one thing we want to make sure of is that if you change from 16-inch centers to something smaller to get more strength, go to 12. So at least the math works when you're putting your roofing system on, and you aren't going to run into any difficulty there. This way I can stagger my joints knowing that wherever I start, I'm going to end up in a good situation. So just a little something when you're working like this, keep in mind, we're going to be putting a sheet of plywood on here. So consider the plywood when you're screwing these down. Use a little block like this and force it flat from the top. The rest of this overhang will be out in the middle of nowhere. And that is what you're looking for. So my system for this is simple. I'll line this all up, start my screws, and then I'll bring the block over and I'll either force it down or lift this one up into position so that when I go to install my plywood, everything's nice and flush. Yeah, so we're gonna show you a little secret now. If you're stuck doing this on your own, yes, you can do this on your own. Installing a roof has never been as easy as this. What we're gonna do is, now if you can imagine, we're having this box frame, like a wall, and it's taller than the front wall, right? It's a full 10 feet, and this is only an 8-foot and change wall. So when we bring this over, it's gonna stand here like this. Now, if you can see at the very top, which will be difficult in the sun, but our finished board is about a ½ inch below our top plate. So I can actually run stuff up, I can push that wall all the way up, and then it should be able to lever into position, all right? This is the system. I'm gonna lift this up and then let go, and it'll fall inside the box. All right, now, the way I'm gonna do this so that it doesn't just collapse and fall apart, because I wanna have something that'll carry the weight as it collapses so I can then slide it to the back, is I'm gonna use this 2x4 and I'm gonna set it on my plate. I'm gonna take my drill and I'm gonna screw it to the bottom side of this plate temporarily to help carry the load. And this is going to be my second pair of hands. So because I'm short, I put my screws in first. Now each screw will carry 80 pounds. That's 160 pounds. That's more than enough for 6 2x4s if we do this under control. And remember, if it's not under control, I can't really reach this all that well, but now, just as a little note, I am 5'10" and a bit. A healthy bit. I like to call myself 5'11". But if you're a little short and using this actual dimensions, you can't quite reach that, or you don't have this long bit, buy one of these. This is awesome. This is an extender. It's designed for the quick lock system on these bits and on the drills. Okay, pop, done. Now I got myself a 2-foot drill bit. I could have the mini-me version and screw this in. Brilliant. Now, I intentionally set these two rafters close together so I could kind of somewhat hold the weight in a convenient location. That's pretty much where my roof is going to go. We'll try to get it somewhat in position here. All right. Now I'm looking for about a 2-inch overhang on that wall. I'm going to have my face board as well. I'm just trying to create a situation where I'm going to have, aesthetically, I want to have the roof just a little bit wider than the pad itself over here. I just think it's going to look good. I want to add trim boards. I want to have a little bit of depth there. So, not quite that much. That works nice. I like the back. There. And here, I've got a nice distance away from the fence. That's good. Now let's see if this makes any sense. It's going to want to run away on me a little bit. We got in the middle, which is what this board is. This represents my middle. We're just going to slide this up. And then, should just, yeah, I feel like if I'm letting go, it's going to fall. So I'm going to be a little bit taller here. Control that drop. Okay. Woo. There we go. Now, we don't need to have a whole lot of distance in the back, just a couple of inches. And now that I've got that in place, give or take, yeah. Now it's time to get rid of this temporary support. They get real hot. The metal expands. It doesn't want to come off the drill. All right. Now, what we want to do here is slide this back out of the way now. All right. Whew. Really what we want to do is we want to square this off now, get it in the position that we really want to have it in. There's a couple of different ways to do this, but what we're going to do is we're going to start in the back corner. And I'm just going to put a little block on top of the plate, slide it over a little bit, get it where I want, and then screw it all together from two directions so that one corner is fixed. And then we can get moving forward. In order to do this properly, we want a block that's really tiny, 8 inches, less than 10 anyway. Now remember our overhang that we're trying to build out here, we have the 2x4 is 1.5 inches. We have wallboard material, so we want another 1/2 inch. That gives me
actual 1.5 inches. My trim boards are 3/4. And as long as my trim board is gonna be inside so that my 1x6 covers over top of it, I'm fine with that. I want to have it a little tight, but not too tight. So I'm gonna go 2 inches from the outside wall to the outside of this. You can set your depth there, which we will remove this plate later. This is a temporary block. And we're gonna screw 1 screw from the outside. And the other thing is we want to set a depth from this corner, okay? So let's go with 7 inch. That way we know we can keep things consistent. I'll just write that down. Okay. That is currently 7 inches away. All right, let's just confirm that we did that somewhat properly. Perfect. 7 inch. Now our corner's fixed. Whew, let's go do the front, same to the front. Okay, so here we are. Once again, we're gonna just set this up. So we're gonna set this little block here. And the reason I'm using 2 is just to help keep it square. Now this one goes here. Now, one of the benefits of building everything square from the very beginning is if it's square on the bottom and the corners are tight and it's all screwed together, it's square at the top. So when you're doing your squaring of the roof, you don't have to pull it out the square and do the 3, 4, 5, 6 rule. Just line up everything to be the same depth off the top of the wall and you know it's going to be square. Now to get the whole rest of this, wow, square, what we're gonna do, tighten that down first, my goodness. Not sure how that happened. You remember, I wrote down 7 inches on the other side. That's from here to here. And this is gonna go out there, that's 7. Gonna wiggle things around until it sits perfect. I like it. There we go. So first thing we're gonna do, screw down this block, hole. Double check that because there was some movement. Yep, I'm out. And I'm out 1/4 inch. Okay. Now, I'm a big boy and I know what 1/4 inch looks like. So when I do this, I'm just gonna move the block 1/4 inch and then tie it down again. And remember, one of the reasons why this system works great is because the roof overhangs on all 4 sides. So even if you're a little bit out of square, it's not the end of the world. It will not affect anything, especially visually. You gotta be at least 1 inch out of square before you're gonna see that from 6 feet away, let alone from down the street. There we go. All we're gonna do is tighten this up. Something temporary, okay? Now my roof isn't going anywhere. I love it. Time to add the rest of the rafters. And so I cut a bunch. I'm just gonna guesstimate, get them all into position for now. Okay. So right out of the gate, this only took us a couple of minutes, and you can see the difference between the roof that we're building here, the whole structure that we're building here versus something you buy prefab from the building store. Remember, they're charging you $1,500 or more for the same size space that's not as tall, and you can't actually put anything on the walls. You have to install shelving everywhere because there's no integrity in those structures. Lord knows there's a large part of the states that it's too much wind. There's no way you'd even be allowed to install one of those. And don't forget that $1,500 cost, you still have to put some sort of base down. You might as well just do it all yourself, get it done, do it strong. You can even hang a heavy bag in here. My God, this is gonna be strong. All right, now remember, this roof is just resting on top. I have 2 screws holding it in position. 3, sorry, so it's not sliding around. That's plenty. There's not a whole lot of force on a roof
in this situation. And remember, my goal here is just to make sure that I'm all tacked together every 12 inches so that my sheet goods are going to have no problem installing. I've already got all my marks made while I was on the ground. This goes really quick. This is a lot easier if you install all your screws first. Then you can hold your wood nice and level. The top of this angled beam on the top of the front, drive them screws in. Remember, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter how perfect this is. We're going to be putting a plywood sheet good and then an asphalt roof. But we're going to use a 1x6 plate to cover all this so that your finished look is going to be just the 1x6. All you're going to see, which is why this design is so awesome for homeowners. Anyone can do a DIY and have a little bit of here and there and give or take. It doesn't have to be perfect as long as you've got good fasteners and then a really nice cover all your mistakes. Of course, being a little OCD doesn't hurt. The front's all done, now we gotta do the back. Man, it is hot. Woo! So if you've watched me for any length of time, you have a good idea that I'm a visual person. So I like to explain things to people who are also learning from visually, right? So what we're going to have is a ladder, which is exactly like it sounds. It's a bunch of boards this way, okay? And it's going to be framed at both ends, and it's going to come into here, all right? And come across this way and extend out the other side. So I've set this into position real temporarily, okay? To mimic the same angle as the rest of the rafters. I'm going to put my finger on my marker. All right, and this gives me a mark of the slope about, I don't know, 3/4 to 1 inch below that board. And here's the reason why. We're going to be having a trim board on the other side, about the same size as this. So if this board is a little bit shorter than the ceiling, it doesn't matter, okay? Better to have a little extra room than not enough. So now that we got that marked, we'll get this temporary board out of the way and we'll cut that down so that we aren't going to have anything in the way when we go to lift our ladder in. So one of these days I'm going to do a video on the list of tools a homeowner has to own. On that list is going to be one of these bad boys. It doesn't necessarily have to be this brand, I just happen to own it, folks. They're about $100. And this reciprocator, the blade goes in and out, really easy to use in a lot of situations, especially something like this. Now I could go to the other side, I could trace it from the other side, and I could use a skill saw, but the reality is when you're on a ladder, having a 7-inch blade spinning around real fast can be a little dangerous, especially if it kicks back. So this tool here, it doesn't kick back. If the blade gets stuck, the handle just goes in and out and the blade doesn't move. It doesn't throw you off a ladder. So if you're on a ladder, this is the kind of situation. It's a little slower, it's a lot safer. And because it's so versatile, it's something everybody needs in their toolbox. The secret to using it is just press up against the material you're cutting and let the saw blade move instead of the saw bouncing around. Wow, thank God for my safety squints. All right, so the simplest way to build this extension is to build it inside of the 12-foot rim rafters that we have, okay? We'll call that, for the lack of a better phrase. So all we have to do is just measure from the top of here, which is the short side, all right, all the way over to the far side on the other end, which is the short side. Now the easiest way to do this is to just trace it out on another board, because we have our template for our angle, and measure it on the ground, all right? We're going to take that length, and we're going to take the width that we have here, which should be pretty easy because this was installed at 10 feet. Yep, 47.5.
Let me try that one more time. All right. Yeah, you know, working alone isn't always the easiest way to do something. 47 1/4. We're gonna write this down. One of the greatest things about building a shed is everywhere you go, it's like a notebook. So just to go over this real quick so you can see this in your brains. We have a roof. It's 12 feet long on each end. All right. We've got our rafters that are all cut using the jig that we made, and they're all exactly the same angle and cut up until the 8-foot mark of the shed. The shed is 10 feet long. So what we're doing is we're putting one more rafter right here, laminated up to this one, plus one at the end, flush from the outside of the 12-foot. And we're going to add a bunch of boards cut this way. And then we're going to back frame the slope of the edge of that to help carry the load. All right, make sense? So what we needed to do is just make 2 more rafters the same as the rest. That's easy. We actually cut them a hair shy just to make it easy to stick in. And then we're going to take the total outside dimension, which I believe was 47 1/4, minus this and this rafter, which is 3-inch. So we have 47 1/4 minus 3, 44 1/4. We're going to cut a bunch of 44 1/4 sticks straight, and we'll do those 16-inch on center, and off we go to the races. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I need 9 pieces. We've got our 2 rafters cut exactly the same, minus a hair, make the installation easy. We're going to center the 16s. The reason for that is when we install our plywood for the roof, we're going to start flush at the top. So, yeah, good point. Our top has a plate. So let's do it this way. Let's measure from the top of the plate and center our 16s. All right, that way we'll actually have wood on the joint when we install our sheet goods. Here we go. And of course, you want to get one of these tape measures with little red squares that highlights the 16s. It makes it so much easier. It's really quite amazing when you think about it. Up until this point, we built this entire structure with a skill saw, a drill, and a reciprocator. Very cool. All right. So one of the things you need when you're doing this is a second pair of hands. So if you're installing alone, I'm basically building a track for this to slide into. One of the beautiful things about screws is you can always remove them. So what I've done is I've created this L because my ladder is exactly the inner dimensions of this existing framework. So if I put it up on the regular part of the roof, because it's framed the opposite direction, then I can slide it over, drop it onto these brackets, slide it in along these brackets right into place. And I can do it from up top without the risk of it falling on my head. This will be fun. Okay, here we go. Past the midpoint. Ta-da! I'm pretty sure I can just slide this into position from inside here. Pull it down first. That's awesome. Okay, so here's my ladder. We're about to slide it into position. The only thing that's in our way is our temporary block holding everything square. So before I remove that, over here, we're going to drive a screw into the top plate from the rafter just to hold everything in position. while we temporarily put all this together. Woo! And be careful, they get hot when you pull them out in a quick hurry with a fresh charge drill, I'll tell you. Save every screw. If you've ever done the math, they're about 30 cents a piece. That's not worth throwing in the garbage. All right, watch your fingers, Max. All right. Perfect. I don't know if I'm a genius, Max, but you know what Red Green used to say, if they don't find you handsome, they better find you handy. That's the Canadian way. It's just a matter of laminating the plates together. Whenever you tighten everything together, it just squares everything up. It's just brilliant. We can get rid of these temporary blocks. The next thing we want to do is create a permanent brace here to help transfer the load. Now that everything is in position, and we can assume it's hanging just a little bit lower than it wants to be. All right, we're going to go with the 2x4 on the flat to the underside, and then we can measure and cut perfectly because we have the template for the angle, which is going to be awesomely easy. And here's what I mean. Let's just get this first. We'll cut that 78 inches, and I'll be right back. Let's take the hair off. And there we go. I have this cut for the length of my space on the angle, and it's going to be perfect fit there, okay? And I don't worry if it's a tight fit here, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure from here to here, cut with that angle, and then I'm going to put the block in place, and I'm going to hammer that block in place a little bit until I know it's taking up some load, until it's lifting up the roof a little bit. And then I'll know it's perfect. But for now, we'll just throw a few screws in place and then get some measurements. Obviously, you want to have these vertical supports underneath these sticks here to transfer the load. So we're going to call that one 10 1/4. We're just going to write this down. Call it 10 1/4, all right? And you can see how close they are to these. We're going to go 7 3/4, 5 1/4, and this one isn't going to count. We're just going to take any block and wedge it in. We can use all these scraps for this. 10 1/4. Okay. Always measure from a factory edge, in case your measurement was lousy. 7 3/4. 5 1/4. Yes. Here we go. I wrote the word template on it so I don't lose it in the wood pile. And so what I want is, I want to put that angle on that block. Get those nice and flush. So what I'm doing is I'm visually lining up the blade with my mark and the plate with the wood. I want to get it relatively close. Lock it in place. Okay, and then I can spin this around and cut it. Here we go. Perfect. Now we are dealing with load transfer here, but not rocket science. Close is fine in this situation. Whew. So here's our first 2x4. I'm just gonna tap this in until it's contact here and there, nice and tight. There we go. Support, done. There's that one. That's pretty darn close. All right, so just make sure we're nice and flush here. Now, the best thing about load transfer is all you need this fastener to do is hold it in place. Make sure that you jammed it in there so it's picking up some load. As long as it's lifting, you're good. Put a screw on an angle, it'll drive it towards it and actually help pick up the weight. It's funny because in the engineering world, any subflooring system that's within 12 inches of a structural point, actually they'll allow another point load wall within 12 inches of another point load wall.
So if you're off a little bit, it doesn't matter. I know I'm gonna get comments, hey, that's not perfectly lined up. I'm like, yeah, well, it doesn't matter. As long as you're within a couple of inches of where the load transfers, you're gonna be just fine. Let's not get our knickers in a knot over details, because the simplicity of this system is in knowing that you can transfer load even without it being perfect match. And that is why I love this system, because anybody can build this. So before we put our sheathing on, realize that this is the edge of my roof, and I'm adding this board flush to the outside of this rim and extend it up. So when I slide my sheathing down, it's nice and tight, and you'll see it'll just come right here, and that'll be where it stops. And then all I have to do is square it off on the outside corner, and I can nail it in place. Problem solved, one-man job. Now, there's an easy way and a hard way to do this. The hard way is to walk up while you're carrying it. The easy way, stand in the middle, put your plywood on the ladder, put a nice wide grip, and just lay on the ladder. Keep your center of gravity nice and low. Right, now we just stand on our ladder and slide it in. There we go. Okay, there we go. Now, my roofing system is going to have a perimeter board here. It's a 5.5 inch board on a 2x4 in plywood. So it'll stick up a little bit above the top and a little bit below the bottom, and that'll help to ensure everything's nice and weatherproof. And all I gotta do now, because my building is square, is go nice and flush with the outside edge here, minus maybe a 1/16. Now, I'm gonna be using these 2.5 inch spiral nails. 5/8 plywood, you're probably fine with a 2 inch, but there's such a small nail, it just doesn't seem to me to have enough girth to it to hold things together in a strong wind, so. Now, it's okay to just put a few nails in to get started. Don't nail right near the tongue, because the next piece of plywood will fit over top of this joint, and it doesn't always fit perfectly. So if you nail too close to the edge, you make it very difficult to snug that together. So start about 1.5 feet away. Just get a few nails in. And then we're going to be in good shape. I think it's always a great idea. Take a moment, mark the middle of your stud. Why not? Now we know we did 12 inch on center, but having a couple of marks here will make it easier once I get up on top. Okay, so you can see that because we made everything a 12 inch on center, this actually finishes in the middle of one of my stringers, which is awesome. So now all we have to do is measure to cut from the outside to the plywood. Now in a perfect world, that would be exactly 48 if we've measured this correctly. 48. Perfect. Okay, so a great system for cutting plywood is just measure out your mark, use your black marker, drywall square. If you haven't got one of these, 20 bucks. If you're gonna renovate or be a DIYer, this is good for any kind of sheet good to make your life easy. So the best way to do this is just set it up on a big plywood, on a 2x4 here. And then you sit on this side and put your cut line on the opposite side, sticking up in the air. Set the depth of your blade so it's not too deep. That way you're not cutting through the dirt. Money in the bank. Okay, so it's cut. I cut this side. This is my factory edge. You always want to make sure you measure and cut factory edge. We'll be touching factory edge. This just helps with the installation. And the way you get this up there is like the caber toss. There you go. Now this one's also 4 feet, which means it can start my next row. Now I can go up there and get working.
before you get started, make sure you nail down the other side of the sheet so you keep it all nice and square. And that's it. Of course, you want to nail every 12 to 16 inches. Just going to use my marker real quick and measure off where all these 12 inches are. I know because of that, there's wood here. Yep. We're going to start the next row with the cutoff from that part of the sheet. Of course, it's 4 feet, so it should end up pretty much in the middle of this. Let's get that in the position here on this side. See how we're doing. Looks like we're running a little bit long. This is a perfect example. We're dealing with wood, so this wood is going to be moving around, right? Oh. See that flexibility? It may not line up where you want it to right out of the gate, but here's a way to make that fit. I set this up. I'm going to push this board over. There we go. Now, it's where I want it to be. Yeah, one of the advantages or disadvantages that we're working with here is that this product has been out in the rain for, I don't know, almost 2 weeks, Max, eh? I mean, I had my bee sting, you had your dog attack, we've had rain, rain, rain. Okay, now. Just want to lift that nail a little bit so we can slide this in a little easier. Okay. I've got this corner in there nice. It's where I want it. So I'm going to nail that in position. Then I can fight with this side. Doesn't have to be perfect. I think that's probably close as it's gonna get, eh? The reason this is a great DIY project is because this design doesn't require perfection, it just requires you to get close. The goal of the roof is to keep the water off of everything inside the shed. So, as long as you use that as your guiding principle, you'll be fine if your angles are off a little bit here and there. The other way you can do this, which costs you a lot more material, is you can overhang your plywood and then snap a chalk line and then cut it off after you've installed it. That's one way to do it as well. But in this design, it's already going to take us 5 sheets of plywood to complete. So I didn't want to have to go and buy 7. That just seems like a whole lot of wasted money. But if you wanted to have that flexibility, make sure everything is exactly perfect, then that's fine. You know, but it's going to cost you. Swollen tongue and groove marks. They're just not always going to work out for you. And that is not a big concern. This roof is just as strong whether these joints are fit really tight or not because they're 12-inch on center. So don't let it get too much of a concern for you. The biggest concern here is getting in enough fasteners to hold it all in place. If you find that you don't have enough meat in the 2x4 on the joint, or it's just a little off center, feel free to take another piece, come in from underneath, nail them all together, and then nail the top down. That's another great way to make sure that everything's got lots of contact and is structurally sound. Whew. So, like I said, there are 2 ways to do your sheathing. I mean, we can always measure here and we can add a few inches, install the piece, and then chalk line and cut it off. Something about me sitting on that overhang cutting plywood is not that exciting to me. My building ends here. All right, so when I'm working up here, I'm gonna be kneeling on my building and just leaning forward and not putting too much on this. I don't want to be crawling out there with a skill saw, and I don't want to do it off a ladder. So I'm gonna measure instead from the beginning. So I've got 27 inches to the middle of the tongue, and that's 27 inches, a little bit too much. So we're going to cut it 26 7/8. I'm going to write that down before I forget. All right. And I'm going to check the other side and get that measurement as well. We'll start with a full sheet so we don't have a seam here, meeting another seam. I like the square more than a chalk line when I'm working alone. It's just a hell of a lot easier to operate. So I know that this is not a traditional installation of a roofing system. I know a lot of guys, they just use a 16-inch span. They're using little roofing clips on the sides. I like to install this way because it's a lot like a subfloor system, and I think the average homeowner will be capable of doing that without any difficulty and without risking life and limb up on a roof. So this works really well, and as long as you're on plywood, you know you're not going to fall through the roof. So if you have any comments about the roofing system we use to set the deck up, by all means throw them in there. Happy to have a discussion. And if you've got an easier system that people can use, then let us know. We are all about getting smarter on this channel, so I'm still learning, and I'd be happy to share your tips and tricks and help everybody grow. Okay, so now we're on the roof, ready to put our roofing system in, which is incredibly simple because we only have one slope. And when you're dealing with a shed, the goal is to keep the water out of the structure. So when we have an overhang on all four sides, we don't have to worry about if the edge of the roof is sealed up really incredibly watertight. Now it's nice to have it tight so that you don't have water in there and it freezes and pulls things apart. But the reality of it is, if it's not a waterproof roof on the edges, you're fine as long as the main body of this roof deflects all the water off the backside. So remember, your roof system is not a waterproofing system. It's a water deflection system. It diverts water from one place to another. That's all it does. So in freezing environments, water always finds a way to move around, and a little bit of moisture in a shed is never going to cause you any major issues. Now in my building store, these flagtions come pre-bent and available in 10-foot length, which means that they're a little bit short for the roof. So I got two pieces. And I cut one down to about 3 feet and it started at the other edge. And now I'm going to go flush here, keep everything snug up against the edge. Okay. Whew, now that that's done, it's time to put down our membrane. So the system here is relatively simple. We're gonna just slide it over to the edge. And visually, we're looking for about enough that can go over the edge and then just past the 2x4 that's there. So feel free to be a little liberal. This stuff comes in a roll. The roll that you buy is going to do probably 2 sheds this size, so don't be too concerned about if you're going to have enough material. And then we're just going to unroll it. Just roll it back on yourself so you have this overhang. That's the edge. Add 6 inches and then cut. And this is just an asphalt membrane. There you go, that's one. And we're gonna cut and measure these a few times, get them all cut in advance, and then it'll make your roof a lot safer to work on. Once you have your membrane cut, just roll it up. The less walking around on this that you do while it has the plastic, the better. There's always a chance it could slip. You don't want to end up at the bottom of the ground. So the water diversion system is gonna work simple. These are like massive rolled up shingles. Okay, they don't have the longest lifespan. So if you want it to last a really long time, you could always cover this up with shingles or go with 2 layers of this membrane, or just come back every 5 to 10 years and see how it's doing. Remember, since this is a shed and there's no heat source inside this building, you're not causing a lot of trauma to this material, especially if you're not up here walking it on a regular basis. So just keep an eye on, occasionally check to see how things are working out. And if you have to go and do any touch-up, sometimes the best thing to do is just put another layer of this membrane down right over top of the old one and just cut it to fit. But you'll see this plastic here, it's set up, it's very like a tar back, it's very sticky. So you want the membrane to finish over the second ridge, okay? This is kind of like a guide for you. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna slide our membrane into place so that we see about 1 inch of our metal exposed, okay? And then we're gonna go like this. We're gonna fold it back in place so that we can expose this whole plastic. Be sure to be standing on the membrane while you're doing this, okay? So that nothing is sliding away. And then slowly roll that back into place, all the way along. Okay? It's a self-adhesive, so you just step it into place, and that'll bond with the metal on a warm summer day like this in about 5 seconds. To finish, now we're going to fold this side back, okay, and do the same thing. Now, just kind of poke it like this. Get the membrane stretched out. All right, and then you can just use your foot to slide it into place. There we go. Simple shed roofing 101. So one of the reasons this membrane works so well is it's soft and pliable in the heat. So we obviously can't continue until we move our ladder. So what we're going to do is, since we're going to finish this roof with the pressure treated 1x6 anyway, we're going to just fold this over for ladder protection and demonstrate that's what the finished roof would look like when we're all done. Put it in place. Now we can get up and down without damaging our roof. All right, next roll. Same thing. We're going to overlap like a shingle. We're going to use that 2 inches as our guide. And okay, 4 inches on the edge again. And we'll just roll it out. Do the same thing again. Let's get it in position. And then we'll fold it back, take off the plastic just like the last time. So sticky. Nice and gentle. When you're pulling this off, try to stay close to the ground. If you look like that, you'll pull the whole thing with you. You might cause it to get caught and stick together. So keep nice and low. You can go a lot faster this way. Again, lift the edge, stand on your membrane, and roll it into place. And then just seal the toe to make a good seal. That's it. It's like river dance. So when we're done, really what you want to do is just fold down your sides and use a piece of 2x4 to just tap it on, okay? And then curl over your edges. This is kind of like ironing your roof on. It's kind of funny. Once you've got this installed, take your block and install it past the corner. Nice and snug, 1 screw's fine. And that's just so that when you're working alone, you've got something to butt up against when you put your trim board on. Regardless of whether you're going to have your roof where it's just a clean drop at the end or a gutter system, you want to make this board longer than what you need, because going too short will be ugly to look at. So we're going to just measure the full length. We're going to call it 126. That's a nice healthy extension past the corner. And if you remember from earlier in the series, we have the template. This is the same angle that we're going to use at both ends of this board. So we're going to take our template and we're going to mark our angle, and then I'm going to just finish that, tracing that line and then cutting it. Trace that line. Now when you put the front face on, it's a little off center, right? So if you want to, you can always sand down the corner a little bit, but seeing as how it's way up there in the sky, I don't think anybody's going to notice. I don't think it's an issue. So what we're going to do now is just take a couple of scrap pieces of wood, attach it to the top of our board so it'll sit flush on the roof, and then when we go to screw this in place, we'll just lift it up by about 1/4 inch or so, and that'll give us a nice overhang underneath the bottom of the roof and make it real easy to finish it all off. Here we go. Oh, that's not acceptable. I got a little bit of wood showing over here. So we're going to be trimming this roofing off anyway. So I'm going to take a good piece of this leftover. And iron that piece right there. Okay, back to putting our finish piece on. There we go. That represents the height of my roof. It's nice and flush on the top. And then drive it nice and tight. That's good. That's better. So here's our fascia metal, and we're going to use this to close up underneath our drip edge. And of course, the exposed part of the wood is 2.5 inches. So we're going to measure from here. You can see the profile. That'll be in contact with the bottom of our 2x4 ridge plate. And 2.5 inches runs to the inside of this groove. And that's where the metal overhang is. Now I know the metal overhang has got lots of room for us to slide up underneath it. So we're going to actually cut about an extra 1/2 inch longer. All right. And aluminum metalwork, when your knife opens, is actually pretty easy. I got roofing gunk all over my blade here. There we go. So I'm eyeballing this because it's a rough cut that's getting installed underneath the finished trim. Now, you might think this is crazy, freehanding this, but with a sharp blade, you can actually take this with a decent amount of pressure and run a pretty straight line. Now, of course, this part is sharp, so if you slip, you will slice your hand open, so you might want to wear gloves. There we go. That's pretty easy, eh? You can actually see on the camera where the cut line is. You see the line? Here. Put the 2x4 there. It's like creating your own little mini bender. Okay. Put the neighborhood of your cut. All right. This is DIY metal bending. All right. Once you got that bad boy started, it'll finish off without much difficulty. And all that is just off of a score of a knife. Right? It's already starting to look a little ridiculous, isn't it? There we go. There we go. Once it starts to go, it goes real quick. Generally, when you fold it over, it'll just snap the metal right there. You hear all that crunching around? Now, all you gotta do is open it up the other way. And that's metalworking 101. For installing this, you could use roofing nails. Screw a day, keep the doctor away. They do sell soffit screws, however. These are tiny little set screws with the same kind of black head. I'm a big fan of the screw. Just feel like it finishes things off a little bit cleaner. From a distance, you know, the galvanized nail, it can show a little ugly. And these screws, every couple feet is fine. Now you've got a completed water diversion system, right? We can go through this again, but water lands on the high side of the roof and follows gravity, which is the path of least resistance, comes to this drip edge. And if there's a lot of water, it might run past the drip edge, and there's a second edge here, and then you've got the wood protected here. My God, what else do you want in life? Now, we're gonna be finishing off the shed with a trim board here, okay? You may wanna do something different in your shed and bring the roof back a little bit. I like the overhang. I just personally like the idea of making sure water stays away from my framing. If you make it too close, you might wanna make your whole shed out of pressure treated lumber, because you're gonna get a little water getting in there in the driving rain when it's windy. This works really well. We can also install a little bit of soffit material here after the fact if you really wanted to. But, I mean, for a shed, this is built better than a lot of homes. Well, that's it for teaching you my roofing system. Hopefully you've enjoyed that. It's a nice simple system you can put on just about any building. Next up is going to be doors and windows. So stay tuned for that. We'll teach you how to install all of your doors and windows and all the tricks and tips for getting a good water seal and a really nice look. This is a solid wood door. It's not a laminated panel, so it's good for exterior use. And we have finished it off with a lovely gray stain and a few coats of polyurethane, oil base, good for exterior. And we did all 6 sides, all right? We've really set this door up to perform well in the outdoors. Now, we also have the overhang, and we have it hidden the way our shed is laying. Shouldn't get too much exposure to the weather, but always good to be a little bit more protected than necessary. The other thing we have today is a couple of simple shed windows. Bum, ba, ba, bum. This is about as simple as it gets. Folks, I think these things are around 15 bucks, all right? They do not open, they will not help you ventilate, but if you need ventilation, this shed design comes with 2 doors, one on each side, so you can always open those up to get a little cross breeze. This is designed strictly for getting a little daylight in there, so you can see what it is that's on your shelf when you're done. Also adds a little aesthetics, but you can see that the window frame versus the flange, there's a nice simple way to cut the hole, stick them in, secure them, done. Probably the simplest window installation we're ever gonna do in our life. So we're gonna pop 2 of those in today, hopefully get them level and centered, square, and looking pretty. We're also gonna have to frame this door. We're gonna reframe. I'm gonna show you a little cheat for doing exterior door jambs. So stay with us, we got a lot to go through, and hopefully we get it right. So there are basically 2 approaches to sticking in a window, and it's all design driven, right? One of them is you put your window where the top of the window casing, which is what we're gonna call this, for lack of a better word, and the top of the door casing are all in a nice straight line. Now in a shed, that leaves that window way the heck up here like that. And if you wanna go with that design, that's fine, you could. What I would suggest is just put a nice long board temporarily attached across the top and do all your measurements from that. But I like things simple, and this is a shed. So we're gonna stay simple. And the way I'm gonna measure these off is I'm gonna just put it on the ground. This is roughly the center line, and I'm gonna just drill this. All right, there we go. So what I'm doing here is I'm just establishing my low point, and I'll do the same thing on the other side. All right, there we go. Now we have the height of our windows established. We have a rough idea where our center line is. Now what we need to do is measure how big a hole we're actually cutting here. So this window is actually 36 1/4 top to bottom. So we're gonna go like this, 36, and we'll go a half to the bottom of the hole, just so we have a little flexibility to make sure they're balanced out. There's the top of my window, and I'll put a hole there as well, because the idea here is I want to trace my hole for my window on the other side of the wall, and then cut it from back there. So I just want to get a couple of these holes to identify where my stopping lines are. Because as long as I'm on the outside, I can't tell exactly where my center line is. This is just a rough estimate for now, okay? There we go, let's do the other side. And then drop that down up here. All right. Now the trick with these little windows here, guys, is the outside flange. It actually is just a little bit too big to fit inside this cavity. But the inside of this flange will have no problem at all, all right? So what we want to do is we want to measure off and cut this line somewhat level. Somewhat. Because the goal here, since I have a full inch overhang, goal here is to cut the size of this window out and then put a piece of 2x4 pressure treated lumber in, slide it overlapping the outside board, and then we'll stick the window in the hole. It's not that much rocket science involved here because we have so much mercy. I'm not even going to bother measuring. I'm just going to cut. Now, because my window is actually 12 1/4 and my gap is 14 1/2, I have, let's call it 2 inches of extra space. So, yeah. I'm going to just do this. That represents my 1 inch gap on each side. And 12 1/4. So I'm going to cut on the outside of those. Now I can't use a skill saw here unless I drill the 4 corners out, then I can cut from the other side. And that is what I'm going to do because using a reciprocator in this situation really is frustrating and slow and tedious. So let's drill our 4 corners now. Wow, that is really noisy. There we go. All right, now I got my safety gear on. Time to get some work done. Wait a minute, I can't see a damn thing with all this safety gear on. All right, just having a little fun. Man, we get enough safety trolls in the comments. Tell you, what is this world coming to? Now I'm gonna just draw this line, good old fashioned way. Now, I just thought I'd point this out. What I'm doing here is I'm lining it up. I know everything's square and level. That includes all these lines on the shed. So I just start and I find a mark on my guard here that lines up with something that's pre-existing, and then I just keep that line straight. Makes this really quite simple. There, that's a hole. All we gotta do now is do the same thing with the other side. It was a little violent, but it worked. Yay! Oh! Now, all I really want to do here, folks, is just check to see if they're about the same distance off the ground from the line that I cut. And if it is, then I'm in great shape. 76 1/4. I know, I'm not going to risk it. There we go. Do-do-do. 76 1/4. I don't have that in millimeters for you, but maybe one of these days I'll buy a new tape where I can have both measurements. It might be more handy for some of our viewers overseas. I am just going to cut a couple pieces of wood here where the bottom of the window is going to go. That'll assist me in sealing it up nice and tight. I'm still using this technique. I don't care what people say on the internet. There's nothing that's not safe about this. This does not kick back if you keep your blade square, folks. Kickback happens when you twist the blade. Then it runs backwards. Never kicks back when you're keeping it square. You know what? And to be honest with you, if you're concerned about kickback on a skill saw, maybe you shouldn't be using the tool. If you can't hold it and keep it from kicking back, I wouldn't pick it up in the first place.
Just wanted to go real quick, because it's a shed, we don't have too much concern about a whole lot of things, one of them being water penetration. Everything that we're doing as far as our finishing technique is going to get an exterior sealant, and it's a polyurethane sealant, which is going to be bonding awesome with all the different wood products and plastic products we have here. So that's why we're using it. I'm already planning on using a polyurethane exterior sealant, so I'm not thinking that it's necessary to wrap everything. This is not a new house I expect to last 200, 300, 400 years. Just want to get 40 years out of a decent shed. So the window is front heavy and it'll keep wanting to fall out on you. So just push it into the one corner. All the resistance up against that cut lumber, it's not going anywhere. Thank God I made it inside before it fell on the ground. Now, we're gonna just center it in the hole because this is designed to be centered with this construction. Remember back when we framed the building, we measured from the center of this wall to this stud. So what I want to do is I want to have this perfectly centered in this cavity, and we'll do the same with the other window. Now to keep this from moving around on us, I just want to get one screw in here. Now, it can't fall out even if it wants to. And that is good enough for now. The other thing we can do, now we can pull it forward and drill one in to the stud from there. There we are. And these 3 screws will keep this in place until we get our exterior sealant on. Once that sealant's on, this window's not going anywhere. Ta-da! Window number 2. There we go. Good. Windows are done. So the main door, as we all know, we changed our design to go from a barn door, which, you know, sounded sexy in the beginning, but let's face it, the more we thought about it, the more we realized it's not very functional. In high winds and wintertime, with animals, with everything, it's not going to work. So it's just the wrong choice for the shed. So we actually have this framed as a 32-inch interior hole so that we could put a 34 or 36 door on the outside originally, but we actually have an actual 32-inch door now. So this hole is too small. It doesn't allow for the operation, and we need to have at least 1/8 of an inch on each side in order to do that. Now, if we had nailed this frame together, we could mark on our plate, take out our sledgehammer and just beat this over, and those nails that were in there would actually bend and allow that wood to pass over, and then we could just tighten it down and we'd be fine. But we use screws. So now I've got to actually cut this plate out where the screws are and then reinstall a new plate, new studs. So that works for me. What I am going to do is I'm going to measure, because I'm going to use these studs over. I'm going to measure 1/8 of an inch. Just going to mark my mark just a little bit to the side of where this stud is now. Okay, and here's what we're going to do. We're going to cut these loose and we're going to install this stud so that this edge here is in line with that, and then I'll put in a new pressure treated 2x4. That'll double it up. We'll reverse the natural bow in the wood so it stays nice and straight, and then we'll be able to install our door directly to that. Once we're done that, we'll cut out the plate and we'll start hinging our door. So hopefully this goes really simple. Here we go. And the way that you get the maximum amount of effect here is by pushing this plate up against the wood, okay? If your Sawzall is loose, then the blade will catch things and then your machine will bounce back and forth. The blade isn't moving. But if you keep, that's why this is such a big solid piece of steel. If you keep that pressed against something, then the blade's doing all the work. There we go. Generally screws, they have a weaker shear strength than a nail. So cutting off the top isn't necessary. We should be able to just wiggle these back and forth and they'll break loose from the screws on top. All right, so we're gonna hammer the sheathing. And what that does is it pulls the nail out. And if you hit the sheeting just under the nail, it'll put the sheeting back, sliding against the nail of the shaft of the nail, sorry, exposing the head. And then you can just use the claw to pull it out. So let's see if this works now. Here we go. Left and right, and left and right. And pop. Here we go. And now we're going to demonstrate the weakness of the screw and the shear strength. We're going to show you here. I got my black marker now on that stud. And that is perfect. So here's the option that we have. If this is the outside of my building, all right, and this represents my door stud, I have this stuff exposed all the time because I'm not going to be installing a jam system here. That to me is just a whole lot of extra work and it's not necessary. But if I have this stud and then I cut this board flush to that, and then I have this, if this was the outside of the shed, just assume my pressure treated is sitting a little proud here, so it's flush. Then when I put on my casing, I have weatherproof material on all sides. And I'm not going to have this sheathing exposed to the elements as they sneak in between the door during rainstorms and stuff. So this is what we're going to do. We're actually going to cut the sheathing at this point, all right? And then install our jacks, because this is the king, this will be the jack. Of course it'll be longer, I'll cut them fresh, but we'll put our header pronounced and I'll put our jacks pronounced, and then we will install our door on that. I think we'll get a much better result. I think I'm going to make this mention in the video here. If you're going to build the shed and you're going to use this design as your blueprint and you're putting in a door like we are and you want to follow the system, let's just map this out. Our door is 32 by 80 inches. That means we want to have probably a ½ an inch at the ground so we can put in some sort of a sweeper. So that takes it to 80½. And then you want a1/4 inch until your, let's call it our jam. That's 80 3/4, okay? All right, now 80 3/4 there is until your header, okay? So mark 80 3/4. That's the beginning of the header. Your header is going to be 1.5 inches, okay? And so then that'll go all the way across your space. And then afterwards, we're going to put a 1x3 pressure treated casing that we're going to custom make out of our deck boards. And then that'll close the gap and get a nice seal on the top. So if you're making this at home, just remind yourself, 83 1/4 is the door hole, okay? And then you're going to have a 2x4 header. And then we're going to use the trim to get up to contact with this surface and then seal it with our polyurethane. That'll give us a pretty good 40-year door. All right, now we're done. Let's get cutting. Might as well take a little off there. It's not going to hurt. One of the beautiful things about a nice new Sawzall blade is that it's nice and sharp on the tip. And if it gets bent while you're using it, just use the claw of the hammer, straighten it out. So what we're going to do is we're just going to rest it here, and you'll see the extension that it goes out and comes back in is about 1.5 inches. So if you're going to plunge cut, which is what this is, be careful. Don't start at the corner. You might go too high and then you'll have a nasty mess outside. It's easier to start somewhere where it's comfortable, where you can see, and then we can cut down and then cut back up, okay? That's crazy. The other technique is use your skill saw. Set the depth on your blade to that of your material, plus a little bit. Now listen, it doesn't matter if you cut into your stud a little bit here, that'll be fine. And then, like I said, since this is all pretty much square and level, and we're going to be going with the casing, we can mark this where our cut is. So I'm just putting that black mark on the saw there so it's easier to see. Pull back the guard, set my black mark on my material. Well, that's a lot easier. Well, that worked. Doesn't seem like the greatest technique. If you got a better idea, let me know. Now it's time to cut the plate out. This was great when we were building our shed, keeping everything square and level, but now that it's been attached to the concrete, we don't need the plate anymore. Ta-da! And the answer to the question, no, I can't use that plate as the header, because the Sawzall actually takes about 1/8 of an inch off each side. So now it's a full quarter short. So I'm going to measure this one, 35 7/8. Sweet. All right, so 80 3/4. There we go. And these are my jack studs. The reason they're called jack studs is because jacks hold things up. This is what you rest the header on. I know a lot of people think that it's like something to do with a deck of cards, but I've never heard of a queen stud before. Perfect. Now, what you want to do here is take a look down your wood. Okay? You'll see this board has got a little bit of a curve to it. All right? So I'm taking that curve and I'm going to install it against the wall so that it curves into the door. All right? You'll see that there. Then I'm going to screw through the face, tie everything together, and that'll help keep that wood here nice and straight. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to pull this forward, flush off the building. Flush there. Whew. It's got a bit of a warp in a couple different spots. We'll start here and then we'll manipulate it. It's kind of nice not working in that 40-degree heat, eh? Now this board, of course, has got some twists and turns in it. All right. Perfect. And a little bit more up there, right? Okay. That was actually pretty straight. Let's get our factory edge right on the concrete. Now we install the header. Now would be a good time to test your door that it's going to fit the opening, okay? Now, we got plenty of room up top. We're going to have about a 1/2 inch on the bottom when we're done. And we have about a 1/2 inch overall dealing with this.
But there we go. Now it's time to put our door on. So we actually went out to the store earlier and picked up a couple of gate kits where they're both the same. This one, the one on the other side. We're gonna finish this off in some grays and blacks and kind of dark tones, very modern look. So we figured we'd get the black hardware, it'll work out well. Now this is all surface mounted. So it mounts on the surface of the door, and then the surface that is mounting on should be flush with the outside of the door. Trick, right? Because right now, this is a little bit too ugly to mount anything on. Remember, our intention here was to come back and put a casing on this that's also pressure treated. So, having said all of that, oh, also, really nice decorative big handles. So what we're going to use for our casings is our deck boards. Now, these are 1 inch thick, 5.5 inch wide actual dimension. So what we're going to do is we're going to rip down our boards at 3¼ inches. And then the balance of that is 2¼ so that when we put them together on the outside of our walls, the 3¼ inch board and the 2¼ here, the dimension to the outside corner is 3¼ on both pieces. That's really simple to do. So we're going to use that as our template for all of the trims and moldings here. So we'll have some 2¼ across the top to close off the gap, and around our door we're going to use 3¼ inch molding. Nice and fat, and it's going to do a great job. So because this is kind of finished carpentry, we're going to change the blade on our saw. And I love this saw for this reason. It's so easy to change the blade. All I do is I push down this little spot here, bring the guard forward, make sure it's not plugged in, of course. Yeah, this is crazy if it's plugged in. Put the wrench on that's already hidden in the handle, loosen that, and then you just take it off with your fingertips. There are a lot of designs of saws out there that are not this handy, or they come with a wrench but they don't have a place to store it in the tool and you end up losing it. I've done that 1,000 times. Okay, and we're going to switch that blade out. Now that one was a really fine tooth blade. I think it was a 60 tooth. I've been using it for a long time for everything. And it has just about worn out its usefulness. So when you want something done and the finished look is oh so important, best to just get a new blade. 15 or 20 bucks goes a long way. And same thing. If you have the guard on, you can't grab the nut. You have the guard off, you expose the teeth. That's why I suggest, there you go. Get that back where you aren't going to lose it. And then off we go. Now, just a suggestion, save your old blades. Sometimes these come in really handy if you have a hole in the floor when you're building something. You can use this as a plate protector against electrical or plumbing lines. All right, so here's my 5/4 board. All right, what I've done is I've just put a sheet of plywood down on my little bench saw, my bench ladder, and I'm going to overhang this stuff really extremely long, and I'm going to just screw it in place in a few spots. The idea here is to screw this in place so that I can have both of my hands free to do the cutting. Of course, if you have a table saw, go ahead and use it. But if you don't, the way you do it is you set up 3¼ Oh, that's 3¼ I'm going to put my thumb there. I'm going to run my index finger right next to it. Okay? And I'm going to use my index finger as my guide. We're lined up. We're going to cut this off at 3¼ and then the remainder is screwed to this table with my lumber on it. It's not going to go anywhere. This is perfectly safe in most countries in the world. Now, using screws to hold this down isn't going to hurt anything. We're going to be using the same fasteners to install the trim boards later anyway. Rolling. So now we got our 2 pieces cut down. And just for aesthetics, we're going to set it back, you know, 1/8 to 1/4. Just so we have a nice little edge there. And we're going to put 1 screw into the jack. and one into the king. Keep it all nice and tight. Okay, so jack and king, every, I don't know, 20 inches or so. It sets me up with about 4 screws. Now we have a pressure treated casing, weatherproof, a pressure treated jack, weatherproof, a solid wood door, polyurethaned, over and over and over and over again, weatherproof. We got a shed door system that's going to last a long, long, long time. And I believe we're even going to paint this thing. Man, oh man. So we just got back from lunch, and lo and behold, a contractor was in the parking lot building some sheds, some of the kits that they sell online. So, you know, we couldn't help ourselves. We were so curious to go out and see what they were offering. And sure enough, you know, he's got the same exterior wallboard. And most of the framework on the back wall and the front wall in the shed that was similar to this one was 2x4, but it's 24 inch on center, not 16. And the roof, it was 2x4. The rest of the framing, it was like a kite. Just a couple of sticks, 2x3s. Everything's designed to kind of get nailed together. If you haven't had the opportunity to look at this video yet, there's one online with a guy actually assembling the kit from the hardware store. And I remember watching the video going, wow, that doesn't look very solid. In person, it's actually scary. There is not too many places on Earth where I would expect that to last more than a few years without getting blown away. So from now on, I'm not going to refer to them as the box store sheds. I'm going to call them the box kites. The crazy thing is the exterior paneling, that's only primed and it's designed to get a paint job, using the same product, but all of the framework is just regular spruce. There's no pressure treated anywhere. There's all kinds of exposed pine. There's just areas all over the place where it's going to just rot. You know, they look cute from the street, right? But for the price, you can build this thing that's like 1,500 bucks all in, including the pad, or you can go buy a really cheap kite shed for a little bit more than that. And then you have to follow the instructions and hopefully everything that's pre-cut and ready to be assembled. And then there's no structure to it. You can't actually hang anything off the walls. Might as well just buy a tarp. So the secret to doing this kind of a door frame, and let's be fair, whenever you're doing pressure treated lumber, finishing trims, every time you make a cut, it's got to be bigger than what you need, okay? This stuff has a tendency to dry, and it's going to get a little smaller. So what I like to do is measure the outside. I'm 39 3/4. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut a different design. So we're going to draw a little demonstration here. Here's a door, okay, and here's my casing, right? Okay, there we go, freehand, loving it. Here across the top, I want to go past the outside edge, okay? Almost like a little bit of an Asian influence with that kind of a finished look, all right? Because when everything starts to dry, you want that overhang. If you cut it square or try to miter, it's going to dry and it's going to look stupid forever and ever and ever. So if you go long on purpose, don't just go square long, okay? That just shows a little lack of creativity. Put a little bit of an angle on it at least, all right? Have a little bit of fun here. I mean, this is the main entrance. Got to sex it up a little bit. And once you got your piece cut, you know. Now that we're dealing with finish trim, but don't be afraid to pull out a sanding sponge. I love these things. They take the contour of anything you're sanding. And I'm not looking for making it really perfect. I'm just looking to get some of these raw, rough edges off, because when I'm using a skill saw as a ripping saw, it's not perfect. But nobody's going to see that from my house. Now initially we wanted a 1/2 inch gap at the bottom. I'm looking around, to my amazement, I don't have any 1/2 inch material. I have 3/8, I got 5/8, I got 3/4. So I'm gonna start at 3/8. We're gonna just set the door in visually and inspect and see how we feel about this. Don't let it fall in. Now, we're using gate hardware here, which is not manufactured perfectly because gates aren't perfect, so you're gonna have to just accept the fact that nothing is gonna be perfect here. What you wanna do is set up the middle of the cylinder right off the edge of the door, and then attach your screws. Yep, that one's going in a bit of an angle. Big surprise. Now, the way you solve this is by pre-drilling your holes, or put the screw on reverse to start the hole. All right, there we go. Just needs a little resistance here. All right, and then we want to square this off. And that's just because these are such a coarse thread, right? Having it on reverse burns the tip into the wood so that it sets the hole straight in and out. Even the one that ended up on an angle, you can fix it by burning it in. Okay, so now we take the door, stick it on our 3/8. So now we have our airspace. Okay, so we're gonna start flush. And from here we're gonna eyeball. I have about a 1/2 inch gap. I wanna split the difference. So what I'm gonna do, take my door, slide it over about 1/4. Now that I got my gap where I like it, I'm gonna put my screw in. Same thing, you wanna burn this in. If you don't burn it in, this wood will end up splitting because the 3 screws are about the same grain spot. That will make sure that these 3 screws this close together, near the edge of a grain, won't end up cracking and splitting off over time. Or you can pre-drill all your holes. I just find this a whole lot easier. Release our panel. I'm going to use this nail here as a wedge so I can open up a consistent gap across this while I'm drilling my hole. Now this little tool here is awesome. I use this when I'm installing door handles so that you don't burn the side of the handle. You know how it gets, eh? Those brush metal handles. You get your drill bit on there, it always rubs up. This also makes sure that the bit doesn't fall off a screw. Woohoo! Nice. So because we have materials that expand and contract, we can install this door stop here. And that way you don't see the door when it's closed, the gap. The way to get that in the right spot is to measure the door. This door is 1.5 inches. Make your mark. Okay, 1.5 inches. Now because we're using surface mounted gate hardware, we want the door in this case to be perfectly flush. So I'm just going to line this up on my mark. And there we go. Now I'll close the door. And what will happen here is if it's out of alignment, just closing that door will straighten everything out. Okay. Now wherever it's laying is where I'll throw my screws. So we have 2 kinds of hardware here. One is going to be the latch, okay? And the idea here is it sits there and the door will latch into it. And this will keep the door from opening by itself, okay? This is like wind control. And this is so you got something to open it with. So we're going to set this up based on these panels, you know, above this area. And we'll set the latch off the middle of the door here. So the first thing is to get this attached
Now you have 2 screws. You want to get them on your door and have enough latch so you can actually make contact. Usually leaves the front screw pretty close to the front of the door. This is one of the reasons why you want a solid wood door. Set your screw up. So there we go. Now, burn that thing in backwards. Really important that screw goes in straight. And let's get this nice and horizontal. The danger here is a lot of times these screws are made with softer metal. So pre-drilling might not be a bad option if you don't have a great little gizmo like this. All right, what I'm going to do with my black marker now is I'm going to attach the door to this hardware and line this up. Now you don't want it to the very far extent. Things might tend to move a little bit. So come in a little bit like this, all right? Top and bottom. You see you don't have any mercy there. You can't go any higher. Split the difference. Okay, bring it in nice and tight. Now make your mark where all 4 holes go. This time, you gotta be perfect. Start the hole with a nail in the direction that you want the screw to be driven. Okay, on an angle towards the middle. Coming up or coming down. This will help make sure that this thing stays where you want it. And when you're driving your screws, they'll go exactly where you want, and they won't be manipulated by the grain of the wood. Remember, the Phillips bit screw head, as soon as the tip has any resistance, because the head is the way it is, it'll just bend on you to follow the resistance of the tip. So you really got to be planning in advance to make sure that you aren't going to run into problems here. Get the hardware in place. Start each of these screws before you finish driving them in, because if anything isn't going the way you want, you can manipulate the bracket by finishing off one of the screws. Now because they're going at an angle, as soon as one side of the screw makes contact with the plate, stop screwing, or you'll shear the head right off. That's why the whole screw is black. Whoops, a little too hard. Okay, there we go. Now this handle comes with nut and bolt assembly for going on like fence boards. So what we're going to do is we're going to buy a few screws that are hopefully already black. If not, we'll put them in some cardboard and spray paint them. But we're going to mount this one here and the same one on the other door. Wonderful thing about this latch, it's security. Because it has this little padlock thing here. All right, if you want to change out these little Phillips screws with some really long screws, you could, okay? And then you can put a padlock on here. I don't know what else to say. It's a door. I think it's pretty. I think it works. Yep, definitely works. There you go. An all-season outdoor shed door. Gotta love it. All right, well, that's it for the doors and windows. Now it's time to move on and start pimping out our shed. Well, as you can see, the shed is taking shape. It is starting to look like a shed. We have things that have to get done though. First, we have to finish doing a little trenching around this building. We're gonna add river stone. So we create kind of like a moat around our structure here where water can come down the hill and be diverted around the structure instead of flowing through it. We also want to put in a couple of support posts. We got to do some soffit work so we can keep the birds out. And we've also got to finish up all of our trimming elements. Now remember, we're going to go very New England style finish here. Bam, we have to get it all polyurethane caulking ceiling. We got to get it painted. We got shelves to put in. We got a cheater door for the lawnmower. We got a ramp to install. Whew, man, we got a full day ahead of us. So stay with us. We're going to show you how to do all of these elements so that you can have the most amazing shed in the neighborhood. Okay, so the plan here is really not too difficult, but it's pretty particular too. So bear with us here. We're going to cut the plate out. We're going to add a couple of pressure treated 2x4s at the same depth as this door here. And then we're going to make a 2x4 door with a finished panel on it. And the idea behind it is this. Remember, our panel has an overlay. So we want to make a door that has the overlay. So when the door closes, the overlay closes over the other panel. That's a little specific, but it'll look like a hidden door. And I think that'll be a really cool feature. So we are going to just prep this area, and then we're going to build our frame, and then we're going to, man, we are going to see if we can get that just perfect. Fingers crossed. Let's go to work. All right, so we have an 81-inch door frame opening. So we're just going to cut these down to the exact size, just to help weatherproof the framing a little bit there. Now remember, your lawnmower is generally 22 inches wide, so the hole doesn't have to be much wider than that. And since this is just a cheater door to sneak it in the back wall, we're going to put it at about 26. 8.5. Nice. 8.5 by 84. So the panel is 8.5 by 84. So we're going to do the same kind of framing style for this door and the other concept. So you take your full measurement, you take a full 1/2 inch off, you make your box. That way we can install this relatively tight to this frame and have all of our give over here, which we're going to need in order to make this system work perfectly. So let's see what we get here. We're looking at 26.5, 26 5/8, 26 1/4. Yeah, I got a little bit of movement. We're going to make our door at 26.5, and then we'll go from there. So I'm going to go 77 on my verticals, and then 26 on my 2 horizontals. That'll give me a nice gap all the way around. A basic box frame for our door. The idea here is that once we've got this, we're going to use a piece of the skin of the shed over top of the door, and that's going to provide the stability so that it's not moving out of square. Beautiful. So I just took my measurements for the top and bottom of the door. I'm translating that onto my panel. And I took the full measurement minus a 1/4 inch, and that'll represent my gap where the hinge goes. Okay, so now we have that, and I'm using a piece of scrap here as a straight edge. Real handy. Now we just got to measure from the floor to the roof line, and then we can get this perfect. All right, so before I can cut my door panel, I want to install my roofing trim here now. And this is just a little, like a crown mold, a little edge trim. So 85. Here we go. And we have the template from earlier on when we framed the place. Here it is. All right. And we're going 85 from that. I think we'll cut it first so we can get a perfect measurement. $85. Template. Now, in case you haven't noticed, we're using this template to build the entire shed. It was just done with a simple measurement technique. I think we got that back on the second video of this series. Okay.
Okay, so we're actual here, 83 1/4. Actual here, 87 1/4. Well, that is nice. We'll take off a gap for the bottom, and we're going to take off 3/8 altogether. This one was 87 1/4. We'll take off 3/8. That's just a matter of cutting this, nailing it to our frame, throwing our hinges. We got a door. So before we attach to the door frame, we'll check and see how our measurements line up. Oh yeah, that's gonna be perfect. Okay, now the most important aspect of this door is to make sure, there's two things we have to make sure of. One, that we don't have too much space. Now my frame has to fit inside the existing frame. Let's double check. We got 80 inches. I believe my hole is 81, Max. Yes. So I can't have that more than 1 inch off the ground or we're in trouble. Pretty darn flush here. I'm gonna nail the hole straight side first. Try to keep this door as straight as possible. When you're building your own door, you really want to consider your hardware. There's so many options. Now remember, our hinge is gonna go like this, the middle of the pin on the cut line. So regardless, we're going to have lots of wood right up to the first screw. So I can actually have an overhang of this material past my door frame of 3/8 of an inch. And that'll still allow that screw to find the door frame, which is awesome. On the other side, I need to have a latch that'll operate. And so that will work for me there as well. Yes, just confirm that your hardware options are going to work depending on where you put your skin. Now that we have a little bit more confidence to move forward, we'll hammer it all down. I'm also going to have to add some horizontal blocking where these two are going to go so that I can tie that hinge into the frame. I'm using more nails than usual here because I'm not just attaching a skin, I'm using this skin as my structural support to keep the door from twisting over time. Okay, so I'm just making sure that where these screws go in for my latch, it's on a cross member and as close to the edge as I can. I'm making my marks. Remember, I'm going to be drilling on a slight angle inwards to make sure I catch the lots of this meat and I don't cause it to split. 6.5 and 65. So because we're using the same hinge system on the side door, and you can see both at the same time, it's important visually to make sure the hinges are at the same height on each door. So we will cut a couple more cross pieces here. Screw all that together and we're good to go. Perfect. We need one more. That is why you keep your scraps around. Perfect. Touch too high here, I think. I mean, it's like a hidden door, right? So it takes a little bit of time to perfect it. All right. Okay, so we measured off to where our center line is. Put our hinge right where we want it. We'll get our hinge installed to the building first, and then we'll attach it to our door. .65 was our center mark. I like to set that hole first because I only have two hands. There we go. Beautiful. Now here's the trick. We have a little bit of room at the top, and the weight of that door is sitting on the plywood right now to create our airspace. So we're going to use our hammer and just give it a bit of a raise to get it off, to get the weight off the wood. Here we go. Well, it's raining now. Wonderful. And here are my screw holes. Just going to line up. You can see how close I am to the edge. So we're going to put a 5 degree on it and go backwards. Help establish that, burn that course of action in. Here we go. And this one we're going to do straight. So when we drive that screw in, secondly, it isn't going to change the direction of the latch, or the position, sorry. So put that one in first. All right. And then we'll do this one on the angle. And this one should be just like the other one. Put it in position, mark our holes. Hard to get the angle for the screw established once the hardware is there. Let's drive everything straight. Okay. And just like the last one, don't put the screws all the way in so you know you got it where you want it. Remember, don't tighten the screw heads till they go flat, or it'll just break them right off. There we are. Okay. Nice. All right. Okay. So the weather report doesn't look all that great. So while we got the ability to work, we're going to get it done. We're going to finish all the trimming on the shed, which is basically taking our 5/4 boards and ripping, like we said, at 2 1/4 and 3 1/4. All right. So that when we come to our outside corners, we will have a finished 3 1/4 face here. And then there's 1 inch thick plus this 2 1/4 gives us the same dimension on both sides of the corner. Just helps tie everything together real nice. Of course, we'll use the 2 1/4 across the top and then the nice thick base across the bottom. Trim everything up, and then we can get our polyurethane caulking out, seal it all up. So hopefully in a couple days when the rain stops, we can get this thing all painted up. Just setting up my table saw. If you're working by yourself, this system actually is more efficient than using a table saw because the boards that you're going to have are never straight. So having a fixed fence causes the boards to get cut different dimensions. When I rip it this way, I'm actually cutting exactly 2 1/4 the entire length of the board. And because it gets skinnier, it's easier to straighten as you install. So I just put 1 screw together in the joint in the corner. We're going to just make sure that this actually fits. I might have to cut the profile of our template on here. No we don't. Okay, slowly we're going to take where we screwed it, attach it to the building. First we'll screw the boards together, then we'll screw it to the building. Now you can see we're getting superior weather protection here. We're also going to be using a polyurethane caulking here to connect these 2 joints, and it's very flexible. It's good for 4 season, and it'll keep this stuff nice and dry. Now, when we were at the store the other day, we were looking at their kits. We didn't see any of the kits that had any of the protection like that. So I don't know what they're using or if they're using a system, but this is the way to finish it off. Now we're going to finish this off with a quick light sand and a paint job as well. I mean, the possibilities are endless for what you want it to look like.
important step. Demonstrate this. Because I'm putting on soffit, I don't want this tight up to the roof. I want to leave room for the soffit to go in behind. Using J-trims or whatever else will have you. So I'm actually going to install flush with this. Remember to burn it in so it doesn't split. I'm going to put it in flush at the other end. That way after the soffit goes in, you'll see the whole 2 1/4 inch and it won't look stupid. If you jam it all the way up there, half of it's going to disappear before you're done. So far we're pleased. I mean, let's face it. After seeing all this, you realize if you can build a shed, you can build a house. Oh, loving it. That's for you, Anthony. This is the best part because this is our door. And the way we're going to do our door system is we are going to have the base trim from the door overhang, and we're going to have it join on that 45-degree angle right here. Okay, so we'll cut that through, attach this to the door, and then over here, at this point, we'll cut that off. We'll also put a 45 here, and then the end piece will have a 45 there. So it'll open to complete 90, plus the gap, which will give you about a 100-degree opening, which is more than enough to get your lawnmower out. Don't put your knee in the green goop. Because we don't get the door open enough for comfortably getting the lawnmower in and out by going tight, we're going to remove almost an inch from the dimension of this wood. Also, I'm going to change the angle, full 55 degrees. Okay, so if you can imagine the last piece here, if it's this far apart, when you open the door, it'll swing to this far open before it makes contact, which is perfect. That is a ton of space. Now this, on the door, all gets painted the same. If there's any door in behind sticking out, just get the paint on there as well. Keep that line straight from a distance. No one will ever know. Okay, gotta get the top on, the outside corners. Let's make sure it functions. Nice. And we'll cut that just a little bit long. Do-do-do. Nice. The next thing for us to do is get some exterior sealant. I'm liking this stuff by Latches. It's an all-weather. Now, because the different country situation we got going on, you probably find a hard time getting Latches product, but you will have no problem going to your hardware store and saying, I'd like to get a polyurethane caulking, okay? So that's the secret. This is a polyurethane. There are many varieties on the shelf. All you gotta do is cut off the tip on a short angle. Okay, not too big. That represents about, not even a 1/4 inch. This was actually marked for 1/4 inch, it was lower down. So less is more. The stuff expands crazy amount. Pull your little tip out of your caulking gun, puncture the hole, and then stick it in your gun. Now, polyurethane caulking is not something you want to apply, lick your finger and wipe. You don't want to touch it. All right, touching this stuff wrecks it. So what you've got to do is you got to get good at applying the right amount of pressure to get a nice consistent bead. So invest in a good caulking gun that when you release the handle, this piece backs off and gets rid of the pressure. So it doesn't keep pushing caulking out when you don't want it. So, and I'll demonstrate. The idea here is you want to bridge the gap from the wallboard to your trim piece. Filling every one of these holes, nice and easy on the pressure. You want to have enough coming out that you're pushing it into the corner. I'm at about a 5-degree angle here. Okay? And I'm pushing it into that joint with the tip of the gun. This way, I don't have to run my finger down there, and I get a nice healthy bead so that it has the ability to expand in hotter weather. Because today is not as hot. And you want to just continue all the way to the other side without stopping. And the better you get this, the faster you can go. But this is not about speed. If you go too fast and you're not comfortable, you'll just make a huge mess. And you don't want to do that. And we're going to move as we squeeze, keeping that snowplow ridge there, that little bit of a bead right in front of you. And every time you stop to get more pressure on the handle, stop moving your gun when you let go of the handle. Here we go, nice and easy. That one not too bad. The best advice I have when working with polyurethane, if you're not happy with something, let it dry and then take a knife and cut it off afterwards. If you get a big blob or a ridge, it's easy to remove with a knife later. Try to wipe it out now. You're just going to get it all over yourself and all over your work. It's going to look like junk. Now the reason we want to seal all this up is because this is our water diversion system. Okay? We don't want water getting in behind our trims. We're going to use this to protect all of our boards. Everything inside that shed. All right? The same system you also want to use on your windows. And feel free to get on a ladder and go across the top of all of these as well. This way, even when there's a driving wind, you're not going to get problems in behind all of your trim. If you don't want to use a sealant, that's fine. Then use all pressure treated lumber inside your shed. But this will also help the exterior paneling here last a lot longer. Because when you caulk this first and then you paint, you're overlapping the paint on a seal. And that protects that caulking from the UV rays. And that'll make this last 40, 50 years without even caulking again. I'll show you what happens when you use your finger. Okay? Get some kind of a weird, smooth texture. But now there's bumps everywhere. So where do you stop? Because you can't get the bumps to sit tight. It's just going to cause you all kinds of problems. It creates shadows. You can't stop. You touch a joint, you got to do the whole joint. Such a pain in the butt. Ah. That's why I suggest not touching it. I think it looks better without using your finger. All right, well here we are on a cold, windy morning, and we're here to finish pimping out our shed. Very excited about getting this project done, as you know. Let's take a look, because what we did, you know how we had this little trench dug out here? We just filled it up with some rock, little landscape cloth. It's a nice way to bridge the gap, and it gives us great drainage. So now the water coming down the hill hits the rock, it's gone. It's going to disappear, go around our shed instead of through it, which is awesome. We have our cedar and our soffit products here, so we are going to put up our posts and put up our roof system underneath to close it all up. That'll keep all of the birds and animals out. Then we've got a few more things to do inside, some hurricane ties. We're going to show you how to install those. Those are simple and they work. And we got a few other surprises and tricks up our sleeve, so let's get at it. So we're going to install our hurricane ties today, and this basically attaches the roofing system to the wall panel. It comes in a hardened galvanized steel. This stuff is all engineered, and so when you buy something like this, you're going to get the screws and the bit and the fastener all from the same company, all engineered to produce and get a good result here. So you don't have to overthink it. You just really want to get it. Remember the rule. When you've got a fastener, every hole in that fastener is designed to have a screw in it. Okay? So whether it's a hurricane strap like this, or it's a joist hanger, every hole gets a fastener. I know that seems like overkill, But it's engineered like that for a reason, and since I'm not an engineer, I don't need to know the reason. I just need to know to fill the hole. So we had a lot of comments in the videos about this latch. And because it's a gate latch, you could get locked in your shed. And they got a point there. So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna throw the string on. It's an old system. I think every old farmer in the world and gardener's got this done. We just gotta drill a hole through the frame so that we can attach this piece of nylon string. And then if you ever do get locked in here when the wind blows, you can just open the latch and get out. Now because we're drilling such a deep hole, I don't want to have a huge hole on the other side. And I want it to be on an angle so that water will actually drain out. I don't want water sitting in the hole. So we're going to do this so that I can get my bit buried in there and come out the other side. Now my string is really brutal to try to work with here, so I'm just going to wrap it around my drill bit. All right. And the idea here is just to give it something stiff that I can use to push it through the hole. There it is. Okay, woohoo! This is just temporary. We're gonna go to the store and buy some nylon string, but we recognize the importance of not locking ourselves in as well. So we've got our beautiful 4x4 by 10 foot cedar posts. They're a little bit too long. We're gonna go right from the concrete pad into a metal block, right into the roof. And we're gonna block it into the roof. So we add some stability and rigidity, but also so that post can support lateral movement for weight. Because we got a couple of surprises. We want to be able to hang some stuff off that. So we just got to mark it and cut it, all 4 sides, because I don't have a saw big enough to go through in one pass. So here we are. Now these cedar posts, they don't have to go up to the sheathing, just into the frame. And I'm just going to throw in 1 screw for now so that the wind doesn't blow it around on me. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take our level this post off in both directions, and then bolt it into the ground. Once we have that, we can take our structural screws. We're going to go right through from the outside and into this post to pick up that. So we have a nice load transfer from the roof overhang into the post itself. In case somebody comes along and bumps into this in the meantime, I'm going to just put my marker right on the concrete. Here we are. There we go. Now that's not the fastest hammer drill in the world, but it is the most convenient. This is a 1/4 inch by 3 1/4 Tapcon screw with a Phillips head. Okay, this takes a 1/2 inch bit and it just tightens up. Okay, now the cedar posts are in, I'm just going to finish installing my hardware. You want to do something aesthetically pleasing, so the middle of this from here to here, and maybe if this screw goes on this line here, that'd be nice. All right, if you want to measure, go ahead, but in my experience, if it looks good, it is good, because that's how everyone else is going to judge it, how it looks. We pre-drill about 1 inch in. There we go. Some nice headlock exterior black screws. The difference is we want to install it on the framework that's in behind the door. So I'm lining it on the nails here. And same thing with the pre-drill. This one's 3 1/2 inches thick, so I'm not worried about the depth of my pre-drill. We're going to use our structural screw coming through here, through the outside plate, through that 2x4 and into this, both 3 inches in. So we're pretty confident that that's going to hold, but the strength of the screw is in the thread. So the way you double the strength of a screw is by blocking from here to the next piece.
So that's all we're gonna do in here. Add some blocking, and you'll notice I got a new tape measure for all of our friends who are on the metric system. So this is 6 1/8 or 155 millimeters. Huh? How does that turn out? Ah, nuts, 154.5 millimeters. And there we go. Now what we've done is we've transferred the load responsibility from all the hardware in the corner and then added this one and added this one because the plywood above it is also nailed down to the, and added this one because it's nailed down. You understand the concept here? Because it's all attached. And now it's blocked, nothing can twist loose. It's gonna be brilliant. So what I'm gonna do here is a little bit different. Just gonna eyeball a measurement here. I'm gonna cut this one in. I'm gonna put a blocking right next to this. I'm gonna screw it from both sides. Nice, toy like a tiger. Your neighbor's awning didn't do as well in the storm as your shed did. We got a little ahead of ourselves making this sexy the other day. I'm gonna pull this off so I can install my soffit trim as far back as I can. It gets nailed on, so I want to install it behind this piece of wood. How to install soffit, take one. All right, here we go. Really simple, we're using a perforated soffit, so we have airflow. We're gonna add a little piece to the back and cover everything else up so it's nice and pretty. This is the product here, okay? And you'll notice the profile, the edges are thin and then everything else is a little thicker. So we have two kinds of trims to install it with. This is a sill trim. It's nice and skinny, and it receives all of that thin edge. It holds it nice and tight and gives a nice clean look. And this is a J trim. Now if you use that, it's not quite as pretty, but it will work. All right, it's just your stuff is gonna be wobbling around in it, and it won't fit as tight. So this is for areas where you have the ends or you have to cut your profile. So we got a few of each and we're gonna get this installed. So we're gonna start off with the sill trim. We'll place our soffit into it, add a few screws, and then that's simple. So we'll just show you the quick process here. On something this square, it's not that tricky, right? Because we have a 10-foot shed. Look at this, 10-foot product. I mean, it's about as easy as it gets, right? You can design your long wall. The outside is 10 feet. Then all of your roofing materials, all your plywoods, all your sheet goods are gonna work out really well. It reduces the amount of work that you have to do. Makes your life quick. So you can whip one of these together in a weekend. Unlike us, we're taking us almost a month. And I'm gonna get these little nails out here. Now you don't have to use the nails out as long as I am. These are leftover from the roof and they're gonna work great. All right, so here's our soffit screw. It's really short because it only has to go through the metal and you only install this on the thin part. And the head is fat, like it's huge. Just in case your soffit gets a lot of weather and does a little moving around, the aluminum siding or the aluminum soffit will tend to bore a bigger hole. But with a head like that, it's never coming loose. 32. I would suggest getting a nice pair of snips like those Weiss. They are awesome at making nice long straight cuts without curling all the metal up. So we gotta get up, then we gotta get over. So every 16 inches or so in the middle, line up your 2x4. Makes everything look very pretty and intentional. And we're just gonna get rid of a little extra metal here that's not needed. Yeah, it's that easy, I know. Now for those of you who are not inclined to use nails in this situation, just go ahead and use the soffit screws. Roy. Let's do the next sheet. Almost inevitably, once you fold it one way, when you fold it back, it just breaks off. So we just want to meet up in the middle here, where it's absolutely pretty. Now I'm tight against the edge right now, and I'm going to pull back this way about 1/8. Just leave a little room for expansion when it's warmer outside. So now we want to get a piece of J-trim and cap this, and then another one reversed to install here, so that we can start putting the next piece of soffit down the other side. So we're going to screw through all 3 pieces of metal at the same time here. Lock that in place. Okay, now we're just going to reinstall our trim, restore this all back to its natural looking beautiful state. Now remember, when you're working with your soffit, especially when you're doing a shed, the world is not going to be perfect, okay? And if you come up a 1/2 inch shy, or you have a little bit of a gap, cut an extra piece or 2 of this stuff, go back to back. The goal is to get it closed, all right? We want it closed so that we don't get critters and bees and stuff coming into our shed. That is the whole idea. Now, if you want to really work hard and do all of the 3D imaging on some software and work out all your building materials before you get started to make sure that everything fits, go right ahead. But generally, in the real world, we just make sure stuff works. All right, here we go. The wrong drill bit. And the secret here is to measure in advance to know if you're finishing with a thin piece or the thick piece. That determines whether it's a sill or a J-trim. Here's my 4-foot headlock screw. Just a little tongue-in-cheek there, folks. These things are really long. I think they're 6.5 inch. You can see that if I come through here into my post, after I'm buried in the wood, I'm going to be coming out the other side, which is why it's nice to have it up above the soffit. So what we're going to do, is we're going to just drive this bad boy in here. We're going to bury it until the head is completely in the wood and it's nice and flush, because we have plans to paint all of this trim. Once we're done that, we're going to have a nice compression between here and the post, and it's never going to move. Part of making things pretty is adding a little bit of color. We're going to use 6 inches from the roof, and we're going to put a couple of these in here and hang some pretty little plants, because I like to throw a little bit of color. 1.5 inch structural black screws, so that they're not just decorative, they're incredibly strong. Well, the next thing we're going to do is we're attaching a couple of eye bolts here. But if you want to know why, you're going to have to watch the Reality RenoVision series. You're going to want to watch the Reality RenoVision episode for this one. I guarantee you've never seen this feature on a shed before. Oh, jeez. Who needs a gym when you got a job like this? Now, we are going to add a little ramp to the side of the shed for the lawnmower, just to kind of make it easier without all the bumps and stuff. What we're going to do is we're just going to cut out a little bit of the grass here so we can drop this side, and then we're going to use some limestone screenings. You can use stone dust, you can do gravel, whatever you're in the mood for. And then we're going to lift this side up a little bit more flush with the front, just to help finish this off. Oh, and there's a lot more grass here than there was over there. Let's see how she works. Ah, how nice is that? Lots of room for lawnmower off the side. Now the only thing we have left to do here, folks, is paint, but we're saving that as a special surprise. So you have to check out the Reality RenoVision video, and we're gonna reveal the final product, okay? So click the link at the end of the description. And if you like this kind of content, then by all means, hit the thumbs up button. We appreciate that interaction. But most importantly, ask your questions in the comments section, okay?
Don't email me. I'm not taking time to look through emails to help people out. Got to get your Google account up and running, and then get in the comments. That's where the action is. We have all kinds of questions and answers and people chiming in from different parts of the world. So if you've got a question, you'll find the answer right here in the comments section below. Hopefully we'll see you there soon.